Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching What If Naruto Wanted to Unalive Himself After Chunin Exam Invasion. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Sitting in the council chambers with a sleeping infant cradled in a blanket was Hiruzen. There was a silent prayer for the numerous deaths, particularly the cherished Yondaime, and silence throughout the room as several council members went missing after being murdered by the Kyuubi. Hiruzen got to his feet. I have called everyone here to decide a course of action to rebuild Konoha and reinstitute a Hokage. Shikaku let out a sigh. I think it's obvious here that we need you to take up the position of Hokage again, Sarutobi-sama. That will be the best way to instill hope in the people and prevent any civil unrest. Although Hiruzen was aware that this would occur, all he wanted was to live out the rest of his days in peace, perhaps even training a few genin here and there, but he also had a responsibility to the village that took precedence over his own interests. Very well, I accept the position of Hokage. Everyone in the room, including Hiruzen's former teammate Danzo, nodded in agreement. Now, I will let the civilian side of the council to direct the repairs of the village as they see fit while our shinobi continue to take missions and secure our borders. We don't need Kumo or Iwa to attack while we are temporarily weakened. The room was filled with nods once more. Now, I need to bring attention to another matter. The child in my arms was the child chosen by the Yondaime to imprison the Kyuubi, and we must decide his future. The table was filled with whispers until one of the civilians raised his voice. We should keep him as a ward of the state to hold his loyalty, then be trained as a shinobi. In order to keep the beast in check, he must only be given the simplest of training, so he can be easily taken care of if he turns on us. Hiruzen gave the man a fierce look, but Danzo struck the ground with his cane before he could argue further. Nonsense. He should be given to me so he can be trained to harness the beast's power and become one of our strongest weapons. I will ensure his loyalty personally. Shikaku gave a headshake. That won't work, Danzo. In order to draw on the power of a biju, its host must be in full control of their emotions, and we all know that those are the first things to be erased whenever you train someone. Just as Danzo opened his mouth to respond, Hiruzen rose. Hiruzen held up his hand before several people opened their mouths to argue, saying, "Quiet. You will wake him." Danzo, council, I will have to decline both your suggestions. Hear me out. If you allow me to adopt him as a surrogate grandson, then I am willing to compromise. After another round of whispers, there was silence until the same councilman raised his voice. Compromise? How, Hokage-sama? Hiruzen let out a sigh. I'm going to regret this, but I am willing to make concessions if you agree to my terms, Danzo. I will allow you to keep your root program, without any interference from either myself or the Anbu, as long as you work within the laws of Konoha and don't force anyone into your program unwillingly. Danzo grinned. I can live with that. Keep the brat then. Hiruzen turned to the civilian side after nodding. I will be willing to lower the standards of the academy so that more of your children and the children of other civilians are able to become shinobi. The 10 members of the civilian council turned to each other and resumed their conversation for a few seconds before the previous man spoke up again. Very well, we won't oppose you if you wish to take in the child. Hiruzen let out a sigh. Okay, now, in order for this deal to go through, I will establish some ground rules. Under no circumstance is anyone outside of this room to learn of young Naruto's status as a Jinchuriki. This isn't just for his safety. It is for the safety of us all. Should another village learn of his burden, then they may kidnap him and turn him against us, and we can't fight the full power of the Kyuubi unleashed. Also, no one can interfere in his life or take any action against him, or I will see it as a threat against myself and will respond in kind. Any questions? Everybody gave a headshake. Good, then let's go. We have a village to rebuild. 13 years later, the weather did fit the mood, even though it was raining heavily today. A rare occurrence for a region that is typically sunny. 2 days had passed since the invasion's conclusion, and numerous people had perished. Nobody was immune to the combined power of Orochimaru and Tsunagakure, not even the third Hokage himself, including shinobi, civilians, pets, and kids. His funeral was held on this rainy day, and everyone was sobbing deeply over their loss. Yes, everyone had a certain amount of affection for their leader. Although they were all sad when he died, most of them would simply grieve and eventually move on. That was the way things were by nature. Like the previous 2 Hokages, Sarutobi Hiruzen's memory was destined to eventually fade into the history books, but not even his family would be permanently saddened. However, this was not always the case. One by the name of Uzumaki Naruto remained at his grave after everyone else had left, and he continued to cry after everyone else had stopped. Naruto had never had a significant other to share his suffering with, a family to love him, or friends to play with. Even as night fell, Naruto remained kneeling at the gravestone, his body trembling from a combination of fatigue and hypothermia from spending hours kneeling in the rain. Gigi, why did you have to leave me? You had to sacrifice yourself, but why? He started crying again as the only pleasant memories of his early years came flooding back to him. Naruto riding on the shoulders of the Hokage and being served ramen. Naruto entering Hiruzen's office and embarrassing him by inquiring about a particular orange book. Naruto being comforted with an ice cream cone after failing the genin exams twice. The list continued. But they all had one thing in common. Sarutobi Hiruzen was the only one who ever showed Naruto any affection. They would play, laugh, and cry together, and now he was no longer there. Naruto felt a hand on his shoulder as he held his head in his hands, fighting back the tears. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw his sensei Kakashi looking grave. "Come on Naruto, you need to go home and sleep. We have training in the morning and I can't afford to have you sick." Yes, it was Hitaki Kakashi, Naruto's hypocritical sensei. On the outside, he may boast about never deserting teammates and always upholding moral principles, but on the inside, he was just as conceited and self-centered as the rest of the villagers. Naruto had been debating this for a while, but the facts were indisputable. It all began when he was tied to a post for attempting to obtain food during the bell test. He could understand why he was tethered to a post because he had broken the rules, but he couldn't understand why he was the only one even though his pink-haired teammate had not contributed to the team's progress. She was given the order to kill the blonde and got off scot-free. Fortunately, it was all part of the test, but those facts stuck with Naruto, who was horrified. Only after they were threatened by one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist did Kakashi start their training in Wave Country, and even then he taught them the fundamental technique of chakra control, which Naruto had perfected months earlier with the Hokage's assistance. Naturally, Naruto pretended to be a fool and purposefully failed in order to avoid raising suspicions, but he was certain that Kakashi had suspicions. The fact that he ignored it suggested that either Kakashi didn't care or didn't want to offend the other members of the team. Naruto had a suspicion that it was the latter. The last nail in the coffin was when Kakashi pulled Sasuke aside for privileged training following the Chunin exam preliminary round, before Naruto could even approach his sensei for assistance. Naruto knew that Kakashi simply didn't want to deal with him, but he was shot down when he attempted to join them with an excuse like he couldn't let the two watch each other's training techniques in case they fought in the finals. Naruto wasn't exactly complaining because he received special training from a Sannin, of course, but he lost all respect for his sensei after that incident. In Naruto's perspective, he was identical to every other villager. Naruto reluctantly turned to face the gravestone of Hiruzen. "Hi, I'll go home." Kakashi turned around and took his hand away. "Good. Be at training ground 7 at 8 AM sharp, don't be late." In a whirl of leaves, Kakashi vanished. Naruto got to his feet, trembling. "Well, looks like not eating all day isn't very good, huh? I don't feel like ramen. Wow, I guess that's a first." Naruto's own joke made him laugh. "Guess I'll just eat some bread or something and go to sleep." Avoiding anyone who might still be out at this late hour, Naruto trudged through the mud and rain on his way home before he had the strength to get up. He slipped a couple of times and lay in the mud for a short while. He searched his mind for those who still cared about him during the walk, but he was only able to come up with 4. The father-daughter team that operated the ramen stand he frequently visited, his former academy teacher Iruka, and the late Hokage Konohamaru's grandson. He was aware that, despite their concern for him, they never truly shared the same bond as he did with the Sandaime. In each instance they would never be his light like Hiruzen was, but they would always be people he cared about. One of the few who would accept his existence was Hiruzen. The civilians had managed to get around their agreement with Sarutobi, but Naruto was unaware of it. If they were unable to take active action against him, they would ignore his presence in order to do it passively. He was just ignored all his life. Naturally, no sane person would overlook the Hokage when he was by himself. He would be treated like he didn't exist at market stands, restaurants, or the academy, and Naruto was more hurt than even the sharpest kunai. Naruto had never felt so down in his life, and seeing his 2 teammates outside his apartment complex only made him feel worse. With a sigh, Naruto attempted to move past them, but he was stopped by a firm hand on his shoulder. "Whatever it is, Uchiha, I'm sure it can wait until morning. I'm in a really bad mood and I just want to sleep." Naruto could not help but admire Sasuke. Now that he was aware of his suffering, he felt as though he had died inside after having his only family torn away from him. Somewhere deep down, he finally understood Sasuke's desire to exact revenge on his family because he couldn't even fathom losing his entire clan. Sakura gave Naruto a back of the head slap. "What the hell, Baka? We come over to your place in the rain to make sure you're alive and this is how you thank us? Stop acting like such a kid and get over it." He was old anyway. It was bound to happen sooner or later. The pink-haired girl had struck him multiple times over the previous few years, and he knew from experience that they were meant to cause pain. It seems that she firmly believed in the concept of negative reinforcement. Ironically, he didn't even feel the pain. In fact, If his head hadn't been thrust forward, impairing his vision, he wouldn't have realized he had been struck. He was deeply offended by her insult, though, and he refused to overlook it. Naruto's head was still hanging. "Haruno, don't ever hit me again, I've had enough, and I think it's about damn time for your little bad habit to stop, or mark my words, I'll start hitting back." His words made Sakura feel angry and sad, and she recoiled as a result. "Naruto, I'm sore." After slamming the door behind him, Naruto continued to walk through the mud, up the stairs, and into his apartment. Sakura turned to face her other teammate after glancing at his door. "Hey Sasu." She noticed him leaving, already trying to decide what to do. She glanced up at Naruto's door and then back at Sasuke's retreating form. She debated for a few seconds before running after the final Uchiha. Naruto entered his bathroom and gazed at himself in the mirror. He wasn't particularly pleased with what he saw. His once bright hair had lost its sheen and appeared lifeless. His face appeared sunken from not eating enough in the previous few days, and there were enormous bags under his red, puffy eyes. He switched the shower on and waited for it to warm up a bit, but it never got warm enough to be comfortable. It was only warm enough to prevent hypothermia. He didn't even feel the warmth when he ran his hand under the running water. In fact, absolutely nothing at all. Naruto laughed and shut off the water. "So I guess this is what it feels like to be dead, huh? I guess my mind just hasn't caught up with my body." The springs sticking through some of the fabric didn't bother the blonde. As she walked out and settled into his lumpy couch, he allowed himself to fall onto the cushion and heard the distinctive sound of metal slamming into metal as his hand touched the kunai pouch's fabric at his side. He slowly reached down and took out one of the sharp ninja weapons after an idea came to him. He felt a tiny cut as he carefully moved the tip of his finger along the knife's edge. He recoiled and pulled the kunai from his grasp. "Wait," he glanced down at the tiny cut that was dripping red blood. "I can feel that." A dejected smile spread across his face. "I just want to feel again. I guess I'll see you soon, Gigi." He brought the cold steel to the bottom of his wrist, where he knew the greatest number of blood vessels were, and rolled up the mud-stained sleeve of his outfit. He inhaled deeply, but his door suddenly flew open as he was ready to start the deed. A blue-black blur flew into the room, knocking the kunai from his grasp and forcing him back into the couch, but he didn't notice the abrupt exertion caused his vision to become blurry and the air to be forced out of him. He honestly didn't expect to see the person he saw when he looked up. Hyuga Hinata, a shy, dark, introverted girl, was one of the girls from the Rookie 12. He saw a range of emotions in her eyes, including pain, grief, and, wait, angry. Hinata approached him and gave him a forceful slap across the face. "What do you think you're doing?" Naruto was unable to decide whether he was more shocked by the girl's ability to speak in full sentences without stuttering or by the fact that she simply slapped him. He forced himself to sit up on the sofa. He attempted to suppress the tears, but they came back. "What does it matter? I just wanted to feel again, and by doing that I would get to see the only person who cared about me in my entire life," they said. People looked at Gigi as just the Sandame, a powerful ninja and the leader of Konoha, but he was the only reason I lived. He was the only one there for me all those years. Hinata had a horrified expression. How can someone have lived like this for so long? I observed him. He never displayed such suffering and melancholy. Hold on. We did this, all of us did. Rewind memories of Hinata's early years flashed through her mind. A young blonde boy was asking for assistance in choosing a gift for his Gigi in a store, and she remembered this clearly. Although she had no idea who this boy was, she noticed that everyone in the store appeared to be oblivious to his presence for roughly 10 minutes. She observed the boy's fruitless attempts to get assistance. Hinata glanced up at Ko, a member of the main house who was her designated guard for the day. What did he do, Ko-san? Why is he ignored like that? After giving the boy a disgusted look, Ko took Hinata's little hand in his and started to leave. Don't concern yourself with him, Hinata-sama. He deserves everything that's happening to him. Unable to object, Hinata simply glanced over her shoulder and saw the boy start to cry on the ground. A year later, Hinata and Ko were once more standing outside the Konoha Shinobi Academy. Hinata-sama, this is where you are going to be attending soon. You have a lot of people expecting great things, and I know you can do it. Hinata appeared terrified. Do you think I'll be okay? Ko grinned at her from below. Of course you will. You are the heiress of the Hyuga clan after all. When Hinata heard what sounded like rope moving back and forth, she scowled a little and turned to look behind her on a rope swing. She noticed the same boy from the year before, staring down at the ground with a look that conveyed how lonely he was. Ko-san, it's that boy again. Ko guided Hinata out of the building while squinting his eyes. Come, Hinata-sama, it is time for your training. A few months later, Hinata found herself in the middle of a forest with 3 boys surrounding her. She ran through Konoha because she had a bad morning practice and just wanted to be by herself. However, she accidentally ran into 3 boys from her class and spilled their ice cream. They were attempting to get her to apologize after forcing her to get on her hands and knees. Tears were streaming down her cheeks as she prayed in private for someone to assist her. "Hey, leave her alone." The newest arrival, the same boy with the blonde hair, caught the attention of Hinata and the other 3 boys. "Oi, get lost, punk. She ran into us and refused to apologize, so we're teaching her some manners." Naruto gave the child a frown. "No, you're not, you're just being mean. I'm sure it was an accident, and you guys are just being mean for no reason." The young boy stepped forward and punched Naruto in the face, sending Naruto tumbling to the ground because he didn't like the tone Naruto was using with him. "Now beat it, before I have to hurt you some more." The child was taken by surprise when Naruto leapt at him and knocked him to the ground in an attempt to keep the boy pinned. Naruto sat on top of him and struck him. "Go. Get out of here." Even though Hinata knew he was speaking to her, she was so terrified that she was unable to move. She watched as Naruto was brutally beaten by the other 2 boys after they had dragged him away from their friend. She would never forget the beseeching expression in the blonde-haired boy's blue eyes as he begged for her assistance, and she was unable to take her eyes off the terrifying scene unfolding in front of her. The assistants never arrived. "Hinata-sama." When Hinata heard her guard Ko's voice, she realized that help was at last on the way. The boys got up and fled. "Oh shit. Scatter." Ko rushed to the Hyuga girl and assisted her in standing up. "Hinata-sama. Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" "I'm fine, but he's hurt," said Hinata, shaking her head no. Following her gaze, Ko noticed the bloodied-faced, unconscious blonde boy. He took Hinata by the hand and started guiding her out. "We must return to the compound, Hinata-sama." Hinata wriggled a little under his hold, but. She gave the boy, who was still lying still, one last glance over her shoulder with a tear streaming down her cheek. Hinata turned her head back and glared at the ground in embarrassment. Final flashback. "I'm to blame for this. I could have helped him so many times, but I ignored him. Not anymore. He has fallen this far because he is alone. I will die with him if he dies because I cannot allow him to carry out what he was about to do for the sake of both of us. I suppose I must be strong at last. I must speak with him, walk with him, and hold him." Naruto turned his head in embarrassment. Unable to control his tears, he hoped that the girl would leave after he made a small show of weakness. He could only imagine that he looked the same, and it made him feel so pitiful. You can only imagine how shocked he was to feel someone sit down beside him and put their arms around him. With puffy red eyes, he gazed up at Hinata, who appeared hurt, as though she were remembering a painful experience. She laid her head on his and pulled him down until his head was on her shoulder. "Naruto-kun, I don't think I could ever understand what you're going through, but you have to remember that there are others who still care a lot about you." Naruto gave a snort. He began to laugh as tears still fell down his cheeks. "Sorry, Hinata, but the list is pretty short. I realized that when Gigi died, a part of me died with him. I just didn't know it yet. It would be better to just leave me be. I don't have a purpose anymore. It just sounds so pathetic, it's almost funny." Hinata let out a gasp. "What do you mean? I thought your dream was to be the Hokage, to be recognized as a strong shinobi and treated with respect?" Naruto gave a headshake. "No, all I ever wanted to be was to be like Gigi. He was so strong, and kind, and understanding. He was a true Hokage, and everyone loved him. He cared about everyone, and even though he made some mistakes, he swallowed his pride and apologized, seeking forgiveness and strove not to repeat those mistakes. I don't think I have that strength. I don't think I ever could." The Naruto she had known and fallen in love with was no longer the same person. Instead, she was a hollow shell of a person. As Hinata sat silently thinking about how she could support him, a thought slowly started to take shape in her head. "No way. That's simply not possible. However, that might just make it work." She got up and knelt next to Naruto, raising his chin to meet her gaze. "Naruto, Anyo, you said you no longer have a purpose?" Naruto gave an emotionless nod. Hinata took a swallow. "Do you want one? A purpose?" Naruto's eyes glowed with hope, and he nodded once more. Hinata grinned. "Then pack whatever belongings you have: clothes, important items, toiletries, anything you need." Despite his perplexed expression, Naruto got up and followed her instructions. "I have nothing left to lose, so whether I do it or not, whatever she has planned for me will be preferable to remaining here." After 20 minutes, Naruto was carrying a small duffel bag that contained his forehead protector, clothes, and a toothbrush. He managed to cram his whole life into a tiny travel-sized bag, which was disheartening. While checking Naruto's apartment to make sure he hadn't forgotten anything, Hinata noticed a photo of his team on the bedside nightstand. She approached it, carefully picked it up, and showed it to the blonde. "You don't want to take this with you?" Naruto gave a headshake. I was never really a part of the team, just a genin that was needed to fill the quota. Hinata winced. I don't know how they could have hurt him, but I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. Come with me, Naruto. With a nod, Naruto silently followed the girl across Konoha. She had a strange sense of confidence that the young girl had only experienced a few times before, and they came to a halt in front of a huge wooden gate as the rain was starting to stop at the Hyuga compound. They had paused. The gates opened on their own when Hinata directed a small amount of chakra into them. Hinata turned to see the blonde's eyes nearly protruding from her skull. She laughed when she saw his antics. Well, at least he's not a shell. I'm happy he still has some of that innocent curiosity that I adore. Wondering about the gate? Naruto gave a small nod. The Yondaime made them apparently several years before I was born. He made seals for all the clan compounds that made them only accessible to those of the clan they were made for, and those who were specifically invited or were in the presence of someone of that clan. Naruto gave a small smile. That's amazing. The Hokages really are great people. Grinning, Hinata took the blonde's hand and guided him around the compound. Naruto noticed a seal matrix spread out over the gate, likely serving as a locking mechanism, and he watched as the gates closed themselves once more. Two guards stopped them just as they were ready to enter the main building. When the heiress of their clan approached, the older men smiled in some perverse scheme of retaliation against the main house. They would frequently take pleasure in gently harassing her whenever they had the chance. They had no idea that the new Hinata was anything but amused and that the meek Hinata was gone forever. Hinata-sama, you know the rules. There are to be no visitors unless specifically invited by Lord Hiashi. The two guards grinned to themselves because they knew that the heiress was far too shy to confront them about it, even though they knew that rule only applied to branch members. When the timid heiress raised her hand in a familiar seal, their eyes widened and they started to perspire. Hinata gave the two guards a menacing narrow of the eyes. I see you two recognize this seal. Good, now I don't have to use it. Don't get me wrong. I abhor this seal, and I will abolish its use as soon as I am made clan head, but I will use it on anyone who tries to usurp my authority. Do I make myself clear? The two guards dropped to their knees, determined to do everything within their power to avoid the caged bird seal's wrath. Forgive us, Hinata-sama. We will never even think of going against you again. Grinning, Hinata escorted the startled blonde inside the house. Excellent. Now one of you go inform my father that I will be meeting with him in 20 minutes. Whoever is not doing that will get a change of Hyuga robes for Naruto, and will leave them in my room. Have I made myself clear? The sentries rose and bowed. They hurried off to complete their tasks after saying, crystal clear, Hinata-sama. With a sigh, Hinata guided Naruto through the corridors as he took in the opulence of the complex. The white walls, which featured the Hyuga crest prominently displayed at regular intervals, contrasted with the well-polished bamboo floors. Naruto was told earlier that this was one of the smaller buildings that comprised the Hyuga complex, but he was unable to count the number of doors they passed. These people obviously belonged to a high society that he could never hope to attain eventually. They came to a halt in front of a room whose door appeared to be more costly than Naruto's whole apartment combined in order to protect their privacy. Hinata hurriedly closed the door after bringing the blonde inside after opening it. Up until now, Naruto had remained utterly silent, astonished and a little terrified of the new Hinata, but silent nonetheless. As he surveyed the room, he saw that it was large, but it was also very simple. The very large bed had simple beige sheets and a beige comforter, and there was scarcely any color. In addition to a single vanity stand at the far end of the room, there was a dresser and two nightstands on either side of the bed, which Naruto could only assume was as soft as it was large. Hinata ignored Naruto's attempt to speak when he turned to face her. Drop your things by the bed. The shower is through those doors near the back of the room, and I will have a towel brought to you along with a change of clothes. Please hurry though, I want to meet with my father before it gets too late. Following instructions, Naruto simply nodded and blinked before going to wash himself. With a sigh, Hinata flopped on her bed and waited for the clothes she had asked for as she watched his retreating form vanish behind the bathroom door. What a horrible day. I'm just glad I decided to check up on Naruto when I did, or he might have. She sat up and pushed the ideas out of her mind. No, I can't even think it. She pushed herself off the bed when she heard a knock on her door. Enter. One of the guards from earlier entered, bowed, and carried a complete change of clothes. Here is the wardrobe you requested, Hinata-sama, and your father is most excited to meet with you. As she removed the clothing from him, Hinata chuckled. I'm sure he is. You may return to your post now. The man bowed. Hi. After shutting the door, Hinata made her way to her bathroom. Even though she could already hear the water running, she chose to knock on the door out of courtesy. Naruto-kun, are you in the shower yet? Hinata opened the door and entered after hearing a soft, hi, From the other side she placed the clothing on the counter of the sink. Your clothes are here and there is a towel on the rack. Inside the shower, Naruto froze. Hinata? Are you in the bathroom? Hinata blushed a little and giggled. She hadn't even considered that Naruto was nude across the shower curtain. Indeed I am. Now please hurry, my father is expecting us. She shut the bathroom door behind her as she left in order to quiet her racing thoughts. She sat in front of her mirror and inhaled deeply. She made herself steel her nerves when she looked up at herself. You can do this is long overdue. Be strong Hinata, be strong for Naruto. Hinata simply sat at the stand, examining herself and reviewing the words she would use to address her father in a few short minutes. After a few minutes, Naruto looked completely different when the shower doors opened. Black and white worked wonders to highlight the contrasting color of his eyes, and he looked much more presentable than he ever had in his orange jumpsuit over a smaller white robe. He wore a black robe with a white sash. Hinata was astounded by how effortlessly he managed to pull off the Hyuga look. He no longer had the appearance of a vagrant, and his hair even appeared to have returned some of its luster. After blushing, Hinata approached the blonde and took Naruto's hands in her own. You look much more like the Naruto-kun I know. After the meeting with my father I will take you to the kitchen and get you something to eat, and then we can retire for the night. Does that sound okay? After Naruto nodded and grinned, Hinata took his hand and escorted him out of the room and down the corridor to her father's study. Every person they passed merely glared back at Naruto, who tried his best to read their faces. He felt completely out of place and lowered his head to avoid their stares. Hinata, not that I don't appreciate what you are doing for me, but, why? Why would you go out of your way for someone like me? Hinata laughed and gave his hand a slight squeeze. It's pretty ironic, Naruto-kun. I asked myself something similar about you after the Chunin exams. As for me, well, you'll find out soon when we meet with my father. They eventually came to a stop in front of yet another large, opulent-looking door. After Naruto didn't argue the rest of the way, after removing her hand from Naruto's, Hinata turned to face him. Ready yourself, Naruto-kun. My father isn't the most pleasant man there is, and he is always trying to find ways to put me down. Just let me handle it, and I promise you everything will be okay. Naruto gave a nod. I trust you, Hinata. Just let me know if you need anything. Hinata flashed a radiant smile. I'm glad you trust me, Naruto-kun. Now when we go in there I want you to kneel in front of my father by my side as I do, and don't move until the meeting is over. I want you to promise me you won't do anything, no matter what happens. After a moment of confusion, Naruto nodded slowly. I promise. Hinata sighed as she opened the door and led Naruto inside a large wooden desk with a very stern-looking man behind it. Was approached by the two kneeling people. He was so serious that he almost begged someone to cross him, and his long black hair was pulled back neatly behind his head. Hinata bowed. To-sama. She turned to see Naruto bowing as well. Hyuga-sama. Hinata was relieved that she didn't have to remind Naruto to be polite. Hinata exhaled the breath she had been suppressing. Perhaps this won't be as difficult as I anticipated. As Hinata knelt in front of his desk and Naruto knelt next to her, she pondered. What is the meaning of this, Hinata? First you go out past curfew and now you bring him back with you. Hinata scowled. Maybe not. Forgive me, To-san, for breaking curfew. I have no excuse for disobeying your rules and accept any punishment you have. Hiashi blinked. Well, this is a first. What happened to the stuttering weak little girl who feared to be in my mere presence? Before turning back to face her father, Hinata noticed Naruto's fists clenching. She is gone, To-san, and I would appreciate it if you wouldn't refer to my future husband as him. Naruto was shocked by what he had just heard. Wait, what, future husband? What the devil is she talking about? Naruto became tense the moment he glanced up at the other male in the room. Hiashi was clearly trying his hardest to hide the rage that was clearly building inside of him, but that didn't mean he wasn't controlling any of his icy demeanor. Hiashi inhaled deeply and calmly before continuing. I don't believe I have approved of a suitor for you yet, Hinata, and you can be sure that it will be a cold day in hell before he is on that list. Hinata grinned, which was not often her style. As heiress, I don't believe that a suitor is necessary. I am free to court and be courted as I see fit, and I have already made my decision on the matter. The elder Hyuga returned the smirk. Oh, I don't believe I was speaking about Hanabi, as she is the heiress of our clan ever since the pathetic display you put on last month, in front of the entire council no less. Hinata had been anticipating this. In fact, her entire plan was predicated on it. Then I demand a rematch. At the time I was still injured from my match in the Chunin exams, and you know that was hardly a fair fight. Even if I had tried under Hyuga clan laws, anyone from the head family of the main branch may demand a match for the position of heir or heiress respectively. This was the final straw for Hiashi, who hurriedly got up from his desk and pushed his chair back. Enough of this nonsense, Hinata. You will return to your room while I have this. This boy escorted out. Hinata got to her feet with equal assurance. Don't you dare speak about him that way. If you ever degrade Naruto in my presence, I will personally make sure our line ends with me when I become clan head. Hiashi became enraged and went to slap his daughter across the face to teach her respect. It was too late. When Naruto got up to stop him, Hiashi's hand failed to reach its intended target. Hinata caught his wrist, stopping it just inches from his face, and she started to apply pressure, twisting it at a strange angle. A sharp pain shot up Hiashi's arm, and his daughter's tight grip pushed him back into his seat. Hinata let go of her dad's hand. I will forgive this incident too, San, but if you try something like that again, I promise the outcome won't be pleasant for you, and for the record, my earlier threat stands. After taking Naruto's stunned hand in hers, Hinata left her father's office. Hinata glanced over her shoulder at the door and noticed that Hiashi was struggling to speak as he nursed his injured wrist and pride, something that rarely happened to the man. I expect a rematch first thing in the morning, and make sure the elders are there. I don't want to have to put on a repeat performance. I would worry about Hanabi's health. With a blonde at her side, she walked down the hallways to her room, out of her father's line of sight. Despite her silence throughout the journey, she could sense Naruto's eyes on her back. Fortunately, there were no questions from him during the journey, and they returned to her room without saying anything. Naruto's questions became uncontrollable once they returned to the young heiress's room. Okay, what was that all about? What do you mean, future husband? And why aren't you the heiress anymore? With a sigh, Hinata moved to her bed and unceremoniously collapsed. Come sit with me, Naruto, it'll take some time to explain. After nodding, the blonde strode to her side and sat down awkwardly, keeping a comfortable distance between them. Hinata scooted closer to Naruto after laughing at his nervousness. Are you scared? Hinata turned to face the blonde, who continued to stare at the floor. Petrified would be the better word. I'm confident that I can beat my sister tomorrow, but it's after that which scares me. After a few more moments of staring at the ground, Naruto turned to face the Hyuga girl. So, why me? She took his hand in hers and smiled. Naruto, for the longest time you have been my inspiration, my light, my hope. Whenever I felt weak or was about to give up, I pictured your face and managed to find the strength to continue on. I admired you ever since we were children, and from that admiration a crush grew over time. Though my feelings grew more and more intense, I'm not sure when it happened, but over the past few months I finally came to a realization. I love you, Naruto. With all my heart I love you, and I want you to be by my side forever. She saw a spectrum of unfiltered emotion flash beneath the ocean blue hue as she gazed intently into his eyes. She saw hesitation, sadness, and fear. She even witnessed remorse. After taking a deep breath, Hinata went on. You said you no longer had a purpose, and I told you I would give you one. Do you want to know the purpose I will give you after what you just heard? Naruto paused, staring at the ground for a few moments. It seemed like forever before he looked back at her. Hi, I want to know my new purpose. Hinata grinned. You will stay by my side, now and forever. You will support me as I claim my birthright as Hyuga matriarch. You will father my children, and love them with all the love you can find in your heart. In return, I will give you a family. I will give you my unconditional love, and I will do everything in my power to ensure your happiness. Can you do this, Naruto? Can you live with those roles, and even if you don't love me now, can perhaps give us a chance? It was this. Hinata exposed all of her feelings to the one person she had ever desired a relationship with. Her heart broke into ever tinier fragments every time Naruto failed to respond, and all she wanted to do was curl up in a ball and hide from the world. She had no idea how long Naruto had been staring at her, but it seemed like an eternity to her. She was certain that he would yell at her, laugh at her, or simply walk away. Possibly all three. She didn't hear his response. In fact, she only saw a slight movement of his mouth, because she was too preoccupied with the ways this plan could backfire. Hinata gave a blink. Jigomen, Naruto-kun, can you repeat that please? This was the first time she had stammered this evening, so Naruto gave her a comforting squeeze on the hand. I said I would be honored to the best of my ability. I will support you and father our children, giving them all the love I was never given as a child, and even though I can't say that I love you as of right now, I will see if I can. Hinata was shocked by what she heard. She had gotten almost everything she had ever desired since she was a young child. In the course of one evening, she recently convinced her true love to stick by her side, eventually entering into a holy marriage and consenting to father their children. Never before had she experienced such joy and complete fulfillment as she did at that precise moment. She started crying with happiness and clung to Naruto's chest, putting her arms around his back. Naruto, I don't know what to say. Just hold me please, just for a few moments. Naruto wrapped the girl in his arms. Of course, Hinata. With a smile on her face at his new moniker, Hinata closed her eyes and breathed deeply, soaking up as much of his aroma as she could. One step at a time, She was bringing her dream, something she had previously believed would only ever exist in her mind, to life. The best part was that she was overcoming her own challenges and fighting her own battles, and she knew that the blonde's support was the reason behind it all. She heard a deep rumble just as she was tucking herself deeper and deeper into his chest. She looked at Naruto, blinked, and sat up again. His head was scratched by the blonde. Sorry about that, I haven't eaten anything in a day or two. Hinata's gaze expanded. Gomen, I totally forgot to visit the kitchen, she exclaimed as she got to her feet and took Naruto's hand. Come with me, I'll get you something to eat. No one dared to speak to them as she walked him down the hallways hand in hand. Drawing several glances from passers-by, news of Hinata's fight with the guards apparently spread swiftly, and few people wanted to cross her, and consequently Naruto. A boy who appeared to be around their age emerged from a hallway as they were getting closer to the kitchen, and it appeared as though he would collide with Hinata. Naruto pulled Hinata's arm back before they met, and she flew into his embrace while dodging the boy. The boy glared at Naruto as soon as he realized he hadn't collided with Hinata, suggesting that this wasn't what he had anticipated. In the meantime, she sighed contentedly in Naruto's arms, but she frowned as soon as she realized who had nearly collided with her. What do you want, Modon? Modon, who was now recognized, gave her a sly smile. What makes you think I wanted something? As they proceeded to the kitchen, Hinata shook her head and guided Naruto around. Modon, the boy caught Naruto's shoulder as he was passing him and twirled him around. And what does a piece of trash like you think you're doing here? You should leave before you taint our good name with your filth. Naruto released his hold on him with a shrug and continued to pass the boy. It figures a pathetic girl such as Hinata hangs out with someone like you. I'm almost upset that I'm going to be betrothed to her next month, almost. Hinata turned to face him and opened her mouth to argue, but before she could say anything, a yellow-black blur slammed into Modon when Naruto grabbed Modon by the neck with his right hand and slammed the Hyuga against a wall nearby, forcing the air out of his lungs. Modon's eyes widened. Modon sneered down at Naruto, who simply tightened his squeeze in an attempt to break the blonde's iron-like hold. Modon's vision began to blur due to oxygen deprivation as he clawed at the hand holding his throat, but he froze when he saw Naruto's face and saw blood-red eyes with black slits. You can insult me however much you want, I don't care, but if you say one word about Hinata, I'll make sure that the only place you'll feel safe again is in your nightmares. With a feeble nod, Modon was abruptly lowered to the ground, gasping for air while a hand rubbed his neck before he shuddered and fled. He glanced at Hinata and then Naruto. Naruto's red eyes returned to their typical blue color as he turned to face Hinata. Hinata gave a charming smile. While I appreciate you standing up for me, Naruto-kun, I need to fight my own battles, or they will never learn. To his future wife, Naruto bowed. Gomen Hinata-heim, but I can't just let people talk about you like that. You've already done so much for me. By the way, who was that guy? With a sigh, Hinata took Naruto's hand once more and ushered him into an enormous kitchen as she started to remove a few vegetables and a small slab of meat. She gestured for him to take a seat in a chair close to a large table. She let out another sigh and started talking as she chopped the ingredients. That particular Hyuga is one of the main branch members, my fourth cousin actually on my father's side. He is a rather unpleasant boy who has made it a personal goal of his to seduce a number of the branch members. His father is on the council and apparently has told him to turn his attention towards me in an effort to gain more influence in the clan. Naruto observed Hinata transfer the chopped ingredients into a stovetop pot. So, he's your cousin, right? Wouldn't that be, incest? With a sigh, Hinata filled the pot with water and turned the heat on. Not many people know this, but over the years the Hyuga clan has taken in less and less outside shinobi, resulting in more cases of inbreeding. This wasn't an issue when it was only 7th or 8th cousins, but now it seems the family trees are getting closer and closer. Naruto scowled. That's a little gross. With a nod, Hinata added a number of spices to the pot and covered it to retain the heat. Yes, it is, but unfortunately my father doesn't seem to be willing to change the practice anytime soon. It will be one of the first things I change when I become clan head. Naruto had a flash of realization. Wait. You mentioned something about elders earlier and now you mentioned something about a Hyuga council. Is that like the Konoha council? Hinata stirred the pot with a frown. Yes, though they tend to believe they have more power than they actually have. They will be reminded that their authority is much more limited than they believe it is. After removing the wooden spoon from the pot, Hinata put the lid back on. She approached Naruto and once more clasped his hands. Gomen Naruto-kun, I've asked of you something very selfish. There will be radical changes to the clan. And it isn't very fair that I've brought you in the middle of it. I won't like to you. We will make many enemies along the way and it won't be easy, but if you stay with me I know we can change the Hyuga for the better. With a smile, Naruto removed his hands from hers and gave her a warm, tight hug. I already promised to be there for you, and I never go back on my promises, that's my our ninja way. Naruto stepped back and raised an eyebrow at Hinata after giggling. She went back to the stove to stir the pot. I told you already, Naruto-kun. You've been my inspiration for a long time, so it's only natural that I follow the same nindo as you do. Naruto grinned and sat down again. Yeah, I guess you're right. A few seconds of silence were broken by the blonde's next rumble with a laugh. Hinata grabbed a container of leftover rice from the refrigerator from dinner earlier that evening. She approached Naruto, who was still waiting at the table, and poured the hot curry over 2 bowls of rice. The tantalizing sense of Hinata's cooking caused Naruto to swallow the saliva that was forming in his mouth. The fact that he hadn't eaten in a long time was becoming painfully obvious, and his body was truly groaning for some kind of food. He was so preoccupied with the food when Hinata placed the bowl in front of him that he failed to notice the girl sitting next to him. Anyo, Naruto-kun? As he responded to her, Naruto mustered all his willpower not to eat. What is it, Hinata-chan? Hinata twitched her fingers and blushed a little. Well, I was wondering if I could sit next to you and feed you. That was definitely not what he expected her to ask, and Naruto blinked. Feed me? Hinata gave a nod. It's been one of my fantasies for a while now, and I figured now would be a good time, but if you don't want, I understand. Naruto laughed and shook his head. No, it's not that, I just wasn't expecting that, was all. Sure, by all means. With a giggle, Hinata drew up a chair to join him. It turns out that Naruto was right when he assumed she meant to say, sit on him. She pushed herself as deep into his body as she could while his arm was around her shoulder. The two appeared to be one blob of a person rather than 2 distinct individuals. Hinata laughed as Naruto, who was not accustomed to this close contact, experienced a flush. They had completely switched places, with Hinata making the steady advances and Naruto feeling humiliated with a fair amount of rice. Hinata broke apart a pair of chopsticks and brought a beef tip to Naruto's mouth with grace. He accepted the food in front of his face and opened up, then, taking his time and relishing the intimacy and experience. He did the same for Hinata. Until the entire meal was consumed, they alternated between going back and forth. Wow, Hinata-chan, that was amazing. I never knew you could cook like that. I can't wait to try some of your other cooking. Hinata reveled in the compliment, in the joy of his recognition, and was ready to reply when someone appeared behind them. Nei-san, what is this about a match tomorrow morning? Hinata sighed and scowled instantly. Gomen Naruto-koi, but we should retire for the night. I have a busy day tomorrow. Naruto turned back to his future wife after glancing at Hanabi's irate face. For some reason, he felt joy well up in the pit of his stomach every time he imagined a future with Hinata. He believed that living with her would be easy for him to adjust to. I understand, Hinata-heim. Leaving the 2 bowls for cleaning in the morning, Hinata got up and carried them to the sink. Naruto, who was waiting behind her, took her hand and allowed her to guide him out of the kitchen. Happy that Naruto started the hand-holding this time, Hinata grinned at the contact. Hanabi was observing the couple with conflicted emotions the entire time. She was upset that her father had woken her up in the middle of the night to inform her that she would have to fight with her sister in the morning. This was typical because they had been sparring for years, but the fact that it was a fight to choose the clan's heiress perplexed her. She thought she was still partially asleep and had misheard him, so she blinked a few times and sat up in bed. However, when she asked him to repeat what he had said, she realized she had heard him correctly. She was told that certain circumstances have come to light that requires a rematch. When she questioned why this issue hadn't been resolved after she had won a spar a few weeks earlier. She had scheduled morning training with an elder to help her hone a few of her clan skills, so she was upset that she now had to waste time making fun of her sister. When she eventually identified the cause of her rage, she discovered that she was essentially feeding a blonde boy on his lap. She had some respect for the boy because he had defeated her cousin Neji in the Chunin exams a few days earlier, but she only knew that he was a loser and an orphan without a clan. And now this loser was getting along with her sister. Nei-san, must you continuously drag our name through the mud by associating with this no-name orphan? If you feel the need for companionship, then ask for someone from a respectful background so the rest of the Hyuga aren't forced to share in your shame. When Hinata froze, she was passing her sister. She was about to scream, yell, or do something when she felt someone squeeze her hand. As she turned to face her sister again, she glanced back at Naruto, who shook his head and had a single tear streaming down his cheek. With a sigh, Hinata turned to leave the kitchen. Come, Naruto-kun, let's head back to my room so we can get some sleep. Hanabi gave a snort. First you let that trash in our home, then you let him in your bed? You clearly have no shame, sister, if you were willing to let that filth defile you. Despite secretly applauding what had happened, Naruto was unable to stop Hinata's next move in time. Hinata whirled around as fast as lightning, raining her hand down on her sister's cheek. Slap. Hanabi brought her hand up in shock as the force of the blow sent her reeling several feet back into the counter. Not even in a spar had her sister ever trucked her. Hanabi became enraged and prepared to strike back, but she was instantly overcome by a surge of unadulterated anger that was solely directed at her. She trembled with rage as she looked up at her sister in terror. Hanabi, I don't know what caused you to become so hostile and conceited, but I don't give a damn if you ever insult Naruto in front of me. I will make sure to bring every single one of your nightmares to life. After taking Naruto's hand again, Hinata left Hanabi slumped against the counter and left the kitchen with the same look of anger on her face. Hinata abruptly pushed her face back inside. And I wouldn't have anyone else in the entire world besides Naruto defile me, and if you don't like that, well, I don't give a damn if you like that or not. Then, in front of a furiously flushed blonde, Hinata permanently left the room, leaving Hanabi speechless. Hinata sighed as they made their way back to the room and turned to face Naruto, who had the same appearance as him when she discovered him dead in his apartment. Naruto-kun, don't believe for a second anything she just said. She is just upset, she didn't mean it. After glancing at her, Naruto turned to face the ground. But she's right, I am just a no-name orphan that only got taken care of out of pity from Gigi. I can't let you drag yourself down for me. I'm not worth it. It would be better if I HMMPF. Hinata stopped him in the middle of his sentence by covering her lips with hers because she was sick of him putting himself down instinctively. Naruto drew away from the kiss, but Hinata had caught the blonde's robes by the front, drawing him in and maintaining the kiss. Naruto was pleasantly surprised by Hinata's audacity and simply enjoyed the sensation of his first kiss. He was unable to get over how right it felt overall, how soft they felt, and how moist they were on his own. The Hyuga girl withdrew with a joyful sigh after what felt like an eternity to Naruto and not long enough for Hinata. When Hinata saw Naruto's puzzled look, her eyes opened and she grinned. Are you better yet? All Naruto could do was nod stupidly. Good now, I don't want you to hear you ever put yourself down like that again. You gave me your promise that you would stay with me, so you aren't allowed to leave me, ever. Once more, Naruto nodded. Sorry Hinata, I really don't deserve you. Taking his hand, Hinata guided him to her room down the hall. No Naruto-kun, you are the only one who deserves me, and you are the only one who will ever have me. For some reason, Naruto felt joy. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps he was just being possessive, but the knowledge that Hinata had promised herself to him and him alone made him happier than if he had been crowned Hokage. Right then it was because he had at last discovered love, the thing he had been looking for all his life. This quiet, dark, shy girl had given him all the love and acceptance he could ever hope for. Upon returning to her room, she removed his hand and proceeded to her dresser, leaving Naruto standing at the door. After removing her beige jacket and letting it drop to the ground, she removed her black undershirt, revealing only her purple lacy bra and pants. The fact that Hinata was unquestionably an early bloomer and showed no signs of slowing down became painfully obvious. Slowly, while he watched Hinata strip, Naruto's eyes grew wide. He was aware that he ought to turn around and give her some space, but he was unable to summon the courage to do so. You can look, Naruto-kun. I don't mind. Naruto's eyes widened and he blushed. Hinata laughed at his nervousness as she glanced over her shoulder. Her pants dropped to her ankles, exposing her matching purple lacy panties, and she unbuttoned them before turning to face Naruto. Naruto inhaled sharply, his face flushed and red as his gaze instinctively swept over her half-naked body. Hinata approached the blonde and gave him a hug, sensing his increasing arousal as she raised her head to whisper in his ear. Naru-koi, we can't sleep if you are still fully clothed. After giving him a cheek kiss, she moved away, went to her bed, and slipped beneath the covers in order to get the blonde to start moving again. She sat up in her bed and patted the sheets beside her. Naruto blushed in shame and blinked a few times before jolting back to reality. Sorry Hinata-chan. She laughed. For what? I already told you that you are the only one who will ever have me, so why would I get mad if you look at me? Besides, it's flattering to think that I am able to make you excited. With a shy smile, Naruto removed his robes, revealing only his burnt orange boxers. Though he was still young and had a lot of maturing to do, Hinata knew he would undoubtedly grow into his body well, and she would have laughed if she hadn't been staring at him in nothing but his underwear. When Naruto noticed Hinata staring, he smiled at her. Like what you see? The Hyuga chose to comply. Oh yes, very much so. He blushed in shame and rubbed his arms as the blonde's smile faded. Thanks. Look Hinata-chan, I know you like me a lot, but I'm not sure I. Hinata grinned. Naruto, I'm not going to pressure you into anything you aren't ready to do. That involves everything from holding hands to consummating our relationship. I love you, and nothing will ever change that. I'd be happy waiting until marriage if that is what you want to do. With a sigh of relief, Naruto and his fiancée went to the bed and climbed under the covers. Still, He smiled at the thought of being able to say that when Hinata threw her arms around his neck, he sat up and leaned over to give her a tender kiss. He reflected on the day's events after he lost the only family he could ever imagine. Hinata gave him a new lease on life and pulled him out of the depths of despair. In order to provide him with a place to live, she brought him into her house and overcame her fears to protect his honor. She even engaged in combat with her sister. And now she was telling him that she would let him dictate how quickly they developed a relationship. It was everything Naruto had ever desired, and there was just so much unadulterated love that it was nearly overwhelming. Thank you, Hinata-chan. I don't know, but I think that I might love you too. Hinata's eyelids lowered slightly and a tear dropped from her eye. She put all of her joy into her smile before throwing herself against Naruto's chest and wrapping her arms around his back. Naruto gave her a hug in return. Resting his head on hers, she started talking in between sobs, and he was about to ask her what was wrong when he noticed that she was trembling a little. Naruto, I don't know what to say. I can't tell you how happy I am. This day has been one of the best of my entire life. You can't leave me. You can't ever leave me. I won't ever be happy without you. With a laugh, Naruto embraced her. I wouldn't ever dream of it. Naruto awoke in an odd bed, one that was warm and cozy but odd nonetheless. He scanned the room, trying to recall his location. All of the memories suddenly returned to him as his eyes fell upon a mass of indigo hair that was lying on his chest. I am now Hinata's fiancé, and I will be a member of her clan and the father of her children. For a few minutes, Naruto simply gazed at the ceiling, allowing everything to sink in. The panic began at that point. What happens if she grows tired of me? Will she simply dump me if she starts to fall in love with someone else? What if I'm killed by her clan, Kami? What if I am banished by the new Hokage because I corrupted the Hyuga heiress? His mind was racing with these and other ideas, and the mere thought of it made him start to perspire. He had no idea that the girl who was lying on top of him would be awakened by his elevated breathing and heart rate. With a weary yawn, she nestled closer to his chest. Naruto-koi, it's too early, go back to bed. When he saw that she was still only wearing her underwear, Naruto flushed, and then he recalled what she had told him the previous evening. She is my new reason for living, and I will always love and support her and our future children because she made me swear never to leave her, considering that I might spend the rest of my life alone, be cheated on, or experience a failed, loveless marriage. I don't think that sounds all that horrible. I know that she loves me, at least when we are together. With a cautious smile, he stroked the top of her head, removing the bangs from her face. He was astounded by how soft her hair was. He noticed Hinata grinning while keeping her eyes closed, and she gave a little yawn that made Naruto think of a cute, adorable kitten. She pushed herself up and rubbed her now open eyes. After a few more minutes, she leaned forward and kissed Naruto's lips chastely. Morning, Naruto-koi. Every action Hinata took made Naruto smile, and he became more and more aware of how much he loved her. Morning, Nada. Hinata gave him a broad smile and simply gazed at him for a few more seconds than he believed was typical. What? Her smile widened. Nothing, I'm just thinking about the nickname. Naruto gave his head a back rub. Well, you gave me a nickname, so I thought I should give you one too, but if you don't like it, I guess I could just call you by your name. Hinata gave a headshake. No, I love it, I really do. Naruto laughed. Good, because I'm not that creative and I wouldn't have been able to come up with anything else. Hinata put her arms around his neck to strengthen the kiss as she giggled and gave him another kiss. In response, Naruto put his arms around her back and drew her in. Hinata made it more intense as his hands moved up and down her back for a few seconds. Their lips met, and they were happy with the affection they were giving one another as they continued to kiss. It felt like the room warmed up a few degrees and they both felt warmth radiating throughout their bodies. Then Naruto sensed a sensation against his lower lip. While as she speaking, Hinata was waiting for Naruto to ask her what was pressing against his lips, but he opened his mouth to do so. Naruto's eyes widened as she thrust her tongue into his mouth, and he gasped in surprise as he felt her probe his mouth. I had no idea Hinata could be this strong. Hinata closed her eyes and concentrated solely on the blonde boy's taste and texture. She pushed him back on the bed and ran her hands through his hair. Pulling at it, she was going crazy because she could feel her body heating up. She was painfully aware of his excitement as she straddled him by bringing her leg over his waist. She was losing control very quickly. I need him, I want him, I can't contain myself any longer. She moaned into the kiss and started grinding against him. It was wonderful to feel him close after all this time. The groans emanating from Naruto's chest were simply too stimulating, especially as he felt Hinata's grinding on his member cause his boxers to become increasingly wet. In addition to the fact that he had always believed he would wait until he was married or very nearly so, He also knew that she was ready and that they shouldn't be doing this just yet because they were too young. Naruto decided to end it before he lost control and withdrew from her, gasping for air. Wait, Nada, are you sure this is a good idea? Hinata opened her mouth to speak, but she saw the uncertainty in his eyes, and he appeared to be a little frightened. She was instantly ashamed of herself because she could tell by the way he looked that he wasn't prepared for this. She turned away from him, staring at the floor as she got off of him. Gomen Naruto, I promised you that I wouldn't pressure you into anything you weren't ready for, and not a day later I break that promise. I don't know what came over me. Gomen. Seeing her depressed was unbearable to Naruto, especially since he was the reason behind it. He put his head on her shoulder and put his arms around her shoulders. It's okay, Nada, I just need a little more time, alright? Hinata nodded slowly, and he could tell that her feelings of guilt were still present. Hey, Nada? Yeah? He raised his head, and she turned her head to face him. I know that this is all new to me, but you know that you are very important to me, right? No matter what, that fact won't change. At last, she grinned, and Naruto returned the smile after kissing her briefly. He embraced her with warmth and affection after what seemed like an eternity of holding each other. Naruto simply stared at Hinata's face as he eventually withdrew. I don't know why I never saw you before, but you really are beautiful, and I never want to see tears stain your face, no matter what. Hinata wiped the tears from her eyes and grinned at the compliment. Yesterday, I tried. I tried so hard to be so strong like you. You never let anything drag you down. You never let anything keep you down. You would always get back up and just try harder. And your bravery gave me the strength to keep going. You were the strongest person I ever knew, and by just being you, I was able to still be me. Naruto kissed the back of her hand after taking it in his. I was never as strong as you thought I was. I always doubted myself, but I could never show it out of fear of what would happen if I let myself fall. I bottled up my sadness for so long, and yesterday it just all came bursting out. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up, but it scares me to think about how far into the darkness I had fallen, and I know I never want to feel like that again. Besides, you have always been strong. All your life you've shouldered all your hardships and pushed through the hurt and pain to get where you are today. You're a beautiful woman. You're an amazing person, and you're a dangerously skilled kunoichi. Hinata shed a single tear of joy and drew Naruto into another embrace, where they remained and simply relished each other's company. A knock on the door was the end, but regrettably, everything good must come to an end. Hinata-sama, your presence is required in the dojo for the spar you requested. Pulling herself back, Hinata went to her dresser to get dressed. Hi, I shall be there momentarily. Hinata produced a long strip of cloth to bind herself with, a tighter black shirt, and a pair of black shinobi pants. When she saw Naruto staring at her with wide eyes, she stopped as she entered the bathroom. She raised an inquisitive eyebrow in his direction. What? You saw me in my underwear last night, so it's a little late to be embarrassed now. Naruto shook his head and flushed. It's not that, it's just that I can't believe you're wearing something besides your huge beige coat. I swear you could hide the whole Hokage monument in that massive Eskimo jacket. Hinata gave him a playful glare. While giggling, she walked back to the bathroom and said, very funny, Naruto. I suppose I won't be able to make you food anymore since I'm too busy hiding in my jacket all the time. With a pale face, Naruto stopped her with a raised hand. Wait, I was just kidding, I'm sorry. I won't joke about your clothes anymore, just please don't take away your delicious cooking. The girl simply gave a charming smile at that moment. Naruto realized that Shikamaru's tirades about women being troublesome were all true, but he neglected to mention how terrifying they could be. Apology accepted. Just remember that teasing the hand that feeds you isn't a very smart decision, not to mention that I'm your fiancé, so when you are ready to take our relationship to the next level, well, I might just be too tired then. Now hurry up and get dressed in one of the robes I had brought yesterday. I want you to be there when I retake my birthright. She then closed the door behind her and entered the bathroom with his arms outstretched and his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Naruto collapsed back onto the bed. A chill ran down his back. I never knew she could be so scary. There is so much about her that I don't know, but I have the rest of my life to learn. The blonde sat up and leapt from the bed, taking a new pair of underwear from his duffel bag and the robes that were on the dresser. After making sure Hinata was still inside, he glanced toward the bathroom door, satisfied that he had enough time. He put on another pair of burnt orange boxers and lowered his orange ones. Then he tied his hite around his forehead and dressed as he had the day before. He was taken aback by how regal he appeared when he examined his reflection in the mirror. He looked surprisingly official, well, as official as a 13-year-old could look. Without the bright orange jumpsuit he had left at his apartment, he was a little startled when he felt two arms encircle him from the back and link over his chest because he was too preoccupied admiring his new appearance to notice the bathroom door open. He put his hands on Hinata's and grinned as she looked at him in the mirror and rested her chin on his shoulder. "You're so handsome, Naruto. I know for a fact that if we went back to the academy with you looking like that, you would have a fan club that dwarfed Sasuke's." Naruto laughed. "That wouldn't matter, because I would only ever have eyes for you." Although Hinata was happy with his remark, she had one unanswered question: what about Sakura? With a sigh, the blonde tightened her grip on Hinata's hands. "Whatever I felt towards her was unhealthy, and I realized that early on in the academy I just wanted attention. I needed it, and in some twisted way I was able to confirm my existence in her rejections. And I never knew any better because I was led to believe I would always be alone. I wish I had found you back then, Nada, I really do." After giving him a cheek kiss, Hinata took his hand in hers and started to move toward her door. "Well, the important thing is that we're here now, so let's just focus on the future." As they left her room, Naruto simply squeezed her hand without saying anything in response. Neji, Hinata's cousin, whom Naruto had vanquished in the Chunin exam finals, was waiting for them outside. The boy bowed. "Hinata-sama, Naruto-san." Naruto noticed that Hinata was equally as shocked as he was by the expression on her face. "Neji-Nisan, what are you doing here?" Neji got back to her feet and grinned. "Genuinely, Hiashi-sama has ordered me to retrieve you for your spar against Hanabi-sama. The entire council has been assembled to witness the spar." Neji sighed. "Hinata-sama, I know that we have had our differences in the past, and for that I want to apologize, but I truly wish for you to reconsider. I don't want to see you get hurt, or worse, be put in the branch family." Naruto was dragged forward by Hinata until he was shoulder to shoulder with her. "I appreciate the sentiments, Neji-Nisan, but you don't have to worry about me. I won't be defeated by Hanabi today, because today I'm not fighting for myself, I'm fighting for the entire Hyuga clan, and most importantly, I'm fighting for Naruto Koi." Neji's eyebrow went up. "Naruto Koi?" Hinata gave a nod. "Yes, Naruto is now my fiancé, and he will be at my side with our children as I bring the Hyuga out of the past." Hinata blushed a little when Naruto kissed her on the cheek to support her claim. For a few moments, Neji appeared thoughtful, glancing between the two, and then, as Naruto opened his mouth to speak, Neji bowed. "Although I don't know anything about you, I know that deep within you have a strong sense of duty and loyalty, and I believe that if anyone was suited to stand at Hinata-sama's side as clan head, you would definitely be the best, Naruto-sama." Unsure of what to say, Naruto opened his mouth and blinked multiple times. He turned to Hinata for support, but all he saw was her laughing at his look. Naruto was finally able to awaken from his daze. "Neji, please just call me Naruto. I'm not anyone special who needs a formality like that." Hinata pulled at Naruto's arm before anyone else could speak. "Let's go, Naruto Koi. Neji-Nisan, I really don't want this affair to spill over past lunchtime." Neji smirked at her and Naruto laughed as they followed Hinata down the twisting corridors to the main dojo of the Hyuga, which was only accessible by the main branch family. As soon as Hinata tightened her hold on Naruto's hand and opened the door, more than 24 pairs of eyes were fixed on the three of them. Hiashi grinned at Hinata, but as soon as he saw Naruto and Hinata joining hands, his smile vanished. "I trust that you are ready for your spar, Hinata? The council has been assembled as requested, but there has been an added stipulation for this spar. If you win, you will be reinstated as heiress." A number of people in the room were laughing, finding that result oddly amusing. "If you should lose, however, you would be forced to accept whichever fate the Hyuga Council bestows upon you, whether that be forced marriage or sealing. Understood?" Hinata gave a nod. "I am not worried about the latter half of this spar. Let's just get this over with. Just know that the victor will decide the fate of the loser." After a few moments of staring at his oldest daughter, Hiashi turned away. "Uzumaki, you are to join me at my side and watch this match. Neji, you may stay by the door." Both boys nodded and started to move to their places, but Hinata pulled Naruto's arm back before he could take his hand away. Her lips were waiting for him as he lost control of his momentum and flew into her embrace. She raised her hands to his cheeks and planted a passionate kiss on him. After a few seconds, Naruto honestly didn't care, but he couldn't help but wonder why Hinata would start such a public show of affection. Hinata let out a joyful sigh as they eventually parted ways, for luck. Grinning, Naruto moved to his location near Hiashi. He glanced around the room as he was walking and noticed that the older Hyuga's faces displayed a variety of emotions. From disgust to rage, he grinned when he saw that Hinata's primary intention with that kiss was to agitate the Hyuga elders, and he could tell by their looks that she succeeded in doing so. The Hyuga gave one of the elders a nod when Naruto was at last kneeling beside Hiashi. "Gomen, if you would." This, Gomen, reminded Naruto of that boy Modon from the other day, and Naruto noticed this. That boy's father must be Gomen. He's attempting to marry off Hinata as if she were a commodity to be purchased or exchanged. Unconsciously, Naruto started balling his fists, and he didn't realize he was drawing blood until he felt a trickle of liquid. In order to concentrate on the two girls in front of him, he wiped his hands on the mat he was kneeling on. Gomen moved between Hinata and Hanabi to the center of the room. This will be a spar to the point where one of the contestants is unable to continue or one yields. No lethal strikes are allowed, and no outside ninjutsu besides that centered on the Juken techniques are allowed. Do both contestants understand the rules of this spar? The elder placed a hand between the two highs that were present. With Byakugans engaged, they both positioned themselves in the distinctive Juken stances. Hinata's expression made it clear to Naruto that she was completely preoccupied with the opponent in front of her. Obstructing out any outside distractions, Hinata's expression was emotionless, the epitome of the Hyuga mask of blankness. However, Hanabi was powerless to stop the enormous grin that poured over her face. Regardless of whether it was confidence or arrogance, Hanabi thought she would easily win this spar. Gomen stepped back a few paces and threw up his arm, Hajime. With two forefingers outstretched and chakra blazing around the fingertips, Hanabi swooped forward and lowered her left arm onto Hinata's shoulder. Hinata threw her left hand forward and slammed it into Hanabi's stomach just before they made contact. Swatting it away with the back of her right hand, Hinata retreated a few paces, and Hanabi collapsed to her knees. That was for calling Naruto koi trash last night. Now get up, I'm not through with you yet. Hanabi glanced at her sister, a little alarmed. She had never witnessed Hinata acting so aggressively before. She was not at all like the timid older sister she had known. Hanabi glared at the boy with the blonde hair who was sitting next to her father, who was the cause of the change. You are solely to blame. None of this would have occurred if you had simply avoided Hinata. Hanabi stood up and charged her sister again. This time with greater caution, she used her left arm to thrust Hinata's thigh and waited for Hinata to block it. Hinata raised her right hand to swat the arm away once more, as Hanabi had anticipated, but Hanabi twisted and used a feint, bringing her right hand down to strike at Hinata's left shoulder. We'll see how well you can fight after I remove your arm. Hinata dropped her shoulder just as the blow was about to land, ducked under it, and spun on her toes before pivoting her right arm around and slapping Hanabi's face with a backhand slap reinforced by chakra, sending her sprawling across the floor. That was for calling Naruto koi an orphan. After spitting a tiny pool of blood onto the ground, Hanabi got back up on wobbly legs. She allowed Hinata to approach her this time. All I have to do is relax and wait for her to attack. She has never defeated me before, so there is no way she can do it now, and I'm not going to start allowing her to. A few seconds later, Hinata rushed forward, and Hanabi used her right arm to strike the spot where she knew Hinata would launch her attack. I got you, bitch. Avoid this at all costs. As Hinata danced around her blow and started to close the tenketsu in the outstretched arm, she watched in horror in an attempt to counterattack. Hanabi raised her left arm to strike Hinata, but the latter ducked beneath the appendage. Now, Hinata was beside Hanabi, using her only functional arm to close the tenketsu. After Hinata's attack was complete, she leapt back, allowing Hanabi's arms to drop motionless to her side. Once more, Hinata lowered herself into the Juken stance. Yield, Hanabi. You can't win now, don't make this drag on any longer. After shaking her head in shock, Hanabi turned red as she became enraged. Shut up. Who the hell do you think you are? You've always been the weak one, and yet Two-san always looked to you to prove yourself. He never gave a damn about me even though I showed more talent than you ever did. And now that I finally gained his recognition and became the heiress, you decide to just waltz in here. Take it back. Fuck you. The young girl in front of them was speaking in a colorful language that caused several gasps throughout the room. A number of elders were staring at one another in disbelief, and it was obvious that they no longer wanted her to handle negotiations on behalf of the Hyuga as a whole. Gomen took a step forward, hardly believing what he was about to say. Hanabi-sama is you unable to continue. Hinata-sama is the victor, and as per the rules of the spar, she is now, once again, the heiress of the Hyuga clan. After giving the elder a disbelieving glance, Hanabi turned to look around the room for someone to inform her that the whole situation was a bad joke. She finally turned to face her father. After they had all turned away, he shook his head and left the room with the other elders. Hanabi collapsed to her knees and started crying, tears streaming down her cheeks. Neji turned to face Hinata, who looked back at him with a slight smile. The boy approached Hanabi's side. Hanabi-sama, come, let's go to the infirmary so we can get your tenketsu opened back up. Only two remained in the dojo after the girl was lifted to her feet and led out without a fight. Hinata sighed as she watched the door close behind her. Just as she turned to face her fiancé, she felt a weight fall on her shoulder and two arms encircle her. When some of Naruto's hair started to tickle her ear, she burst out laughing. Nada, that was amazing. I've never seen you more focused, determined, or passionate than you were in those few minutes when you showed your strength to the entire Hyuga Council today. I've never been more proud of anyone in my entire life. With a joyful sigh, Hinata closed her eyes and melted into his arms. Thank you Narukoi, but I'm afraid it will only get more difficult from here on out. This was only the first step in bringing about the dawn of the new Hyuga clan. Raising his head, Naruto planted a kiss on her cheek, and I'll be here every step of the way. Hinata grinned and simply lay against him for a few minutes, taking in the tranquility for what it was and relishing the solace that only Naruto could provide once more. A sound that came from deep within Naruto's stomach interrupted their moment. Gurgle. Naruto laughed, sorry about that, I usually have something to eat when I wake up. With a smile, Hinata left his embrace. She took hold of his hand and escorted him from the room. Well then, how about we go get some lunch then? Naruto nodded after swallowing the water in his mouth. Sounds great. Where did you have in mind? The girl laughed. It's a secret, but I know for a fact that you'll love it. She guided him to the compound's entrance, pausing only to put on their sandals before they departed. Upon exiting the building, Naruto glanced at the guards, who stood alert and turned slightly pale upon seeing Hinata and her blonde fiancé. However, the girl showed no signs of being aware of their presence. Naruto grinned because he was accustomed to being viewed as a disease, a plague that plagued Konoha, and was shunned as such. He would have to get used to being treated with respect, but fearful respect. The two strolled down the streets hand in hand, their heads resting on each other's. Naruto was pleasantly surprised when they stopped in front of his favorite ramen stand because he wasn't really paying attention to anything but the girl next to him. Naruto smiled as he turned to face his Hyuga partner. I never knew you liked ramen, Nada. Hinata gave a shrug. I like it, though I'm not as enthusiastic about it as you are. Naruto simply chuckled and gave the girl a firm embrace. You're the best, Nada. After letting her go, he sat on one of the stools in the stand and guided her by the hand. Oi, Tuchi Jiji, a bowl of miso please. Sitting beside him on the stool was Hinata. Make that two please. They could hear pots and pans being moved from the rear, coming right up. I had already started. I knew you would be around here soon, so I decided to be preemptive. With a giggle, Hinata turned to face Naruto, who simply shrugged. What can I say? I'm a creature of habit. An older man carrying two large bowls came out of the back, and Hinata simply shook her head and smiled. The smell of the salty smell emanating from the bowls was enough to make one's mouth water unexpectedly. Naruto waited for Hinata to finish eating before starting, which is something he never did. This caused the elderly ramen maker to become agitated. Tuchi's eyebrow went up. Okay, who are you and what have you done with Naruto? He would have already been halfway finished with the noodles by now. Naruto looked at Hinata and laughed. Well, I guess I had to grow up a bit. He put a tiny wad of noodles in his mouth and started chewing, enjoying how well the broth matched the noodles. The noodles themselves were perfectly cooked, not too hard from undercooking, nor too chewy from overcooking. The dish's soft texture gained an additional crunch from the addition of snow peas and bamboo shoots, which perfectly balanced the chewiness of the noodles in general. Naruto believed he could survive entirely on ramen, but he was aware that this would be detrimental to his health because he had already tried it. After swallowing the food, Naruto turned back to face the chef. Once again, you have outdone yourself, Tuchi Jiji, it's delicious. Hinata nodded in agreement after swallowing her bite. Yes, this is wonderful, Tuchi-san, thank you. The chef of ramen chuckled. Well, it's always good to know my hard work is appreciated now. Naruto, what's with the new look? I can't say it looks bad, definitely an improvement from that orange jumpsuit you used to wear. Naruto pretended to be upset. What? I thought you said it made me look dashing? Tuchi shook his head and laughed. Yes, it was very dashing, but it wasn't exactly ninja-like. I mean, it can't be very easy to blend into your surroundings when you stand out from the scenery like that. Traitorous ramen chefs is what Naruto muttered as he consumed another wad of noodles. Well, to answer your question, well, Hinata and we. With a smile on his face, Tuchi gave the blonde a shoulder pat. You managed to get yourself a girlfriend, did ya? I'm so proud of you. Sniff, they grow up so fast, sniff. He turned to Hinata. Make sure you take good care of him now, okay? He means well, but he can be a little dense about some things, especially when it comes to what he eats. Hinata laughed. I know, I made sure I made him something nutritious last night. Having heard Hinata's final words, Ayame left from the rear at this point. Wait, did you two spend the night together? Naruto paled as Hinata nodded and smiled. He had discussed with Ayame on multiple occasions the importance of treating girls with respect, and he didn't like the way she was staring at him. To soothe the ramen chef, Naruto started to wave his arms. But we didn't do anything. I promise. We just slept in the same bed, that's it. Ayame gave the boy a narrowed look. Good, I'm glad to hear that you at least somewhat paid attention to all those talks we had. You shouldn't be doing those kinds of things until you are really committed to one another. Naruto let out a sigh of relief. Trust me, I know. Besides, we are already pretty committed. I mean, the only step we have left is marriage. She is my fiancé. After finishing her meal while Naruto was occupied defending himself, Hinata grinned and rested her head on his shoulder. It was one of her many late-night fantasies, but she didn't think she would ever grow weary of hearing that she was getting married to her childhood crush. As Ayame's jaw dropped, Tucci let go of the pot he was holding. Wait, you two are engaged? When did this happen? Naruto rubbed the back of his head and took another bite of his food. Well, just last night, I guess. With stars in her eyes, Ayame appeared suddenly in front of Naruto and Hinata. So how did you do it? Did you take her to dinner first? Oh, I bet you took her on a picnic and popped the question as the sun was setting. Oh, that is so romantic. I heard from some of my friends that the girl never forgets the night when she gets proposed to. They say it's magical. Hinata answered while Naruto struggled to think of something to say. Sorry Ayame-san, but Naruto never proposed to me. I asked him to be my husband. Naruto gazed down at his partially consumed bowl of ramen. It's unbelievable that I never even considered popping the question. I ruined what should have been one of her greatest memories. Ayame gave Naruto a shoulder pat after observing his gloomy expression. I'm sorry Naruto, I just assumed. I didn't mean anything by it. I know that you two are going to be happy together no matter what. Some silly little thing like proposing doesn't really matter. What matters is each other, right? Naruto leaned down to give Hinata a head kiss while she was laughing. You're right, what matters is that we are happy with each other. But I'll make sure it's a night she won't soon forget, and I will do this right someday. The two looked so happy that Ayame couldn't help but smile. So tell me everything. How did it happen? Naruto bit into it again. Well, it first started last night when I got home and she came to my apartment and... Naruto baka. When Naruto and Hinata leaned up and turned around, they saw a bewildered Kakashi, an irritated Sakura, and an irritated Sasuke. With a sigh, Naruto removed several Ryo notes and placed them on the counter. He realized that he probably wouldn't be able to finish his meal. Hey guys, what's up? Sakura's face flushed with anger. What's up? What's up? We spent the entire morning looking for you, and when we finally find you, you're stuffing your face with ramen. To soothe Sakura, Kakashi placed a hand on her shoulder. What your teammate is trying to say is that we were worried about you, and we couldn't find you anywhere. I remember telling you to meet us for training at 8 this morning, but you didn't show, so you have to understand why we are a little upset with you. Anger was causing Naruto to ball his fists. You know they were worried. Where were they last night when I needed someone, if they were that concerned? When I was going to do something really dumb, where were they? Hinata was the only one who bothered to check on me, and they have the audacity to tell me that they are concerned. A delicate hand passed over Naruto's and he turned to face Hinata, who was smiling comfortingly at him after taking his hand in hers. Naruto got out of the booth. He turned to Hinata and gave the three a half-hearted smile before saying, I apologize for worrying you all, but I had a lot happen and I couldn't make it to training. Come on, Nada, let's go. A whirl of leaves signaled the arrival of another individual before anyone else could speak. As the leaves began to fall, Naruto noticed an elderly man with white hair who looked familiar. Ero Sennin. Jiraiya slapped Naruto outside the head while glaring at him. How many times do I have to tell you, stop calling me that? Naruto gave the man a gut thrust. And how many times do I have to tell you, if the shoe fits, then put it on? Then Jiraiya saw a number of very clear differences in his student. He was dressed in the Hyuga clan's robes. Specifically the main branch's attire, which was the first thing that caught the eye. The second was that he was actually holding the Hyuga heiress's hand, not to mention that the heiress was standing very near Naruto, almost protectively. Jiraiya blurted out the first thing that came to mind because he was unable to read the tension in the air. Oi, Gaki, are you two together or something? What the Sannin had already noticed was now being noticed by everyone else. Sakura dismissed Kakashi's hand with a shrug. Yeah, why are you wearing Hyuga robes? And why are you two holding hands? In fact, why are you even hanging out with Hinata? I'm surprised she hasn't fainted yet or stuttered some incomprehensible mumble that no one hears, then pokes her fingers together. Hinata was about to defend herself when Naruto approached and confronted Sakura. Look, insult me all you want, call me a baka. Call me a dobi. Hell, even hit me. I don't give a fuck, but don't you ever insult my fiancé again, do you understand me? Sakura was only able to nod before Naruto returned to Hinata and took her hand before leaving the group. Hinata sighed and rested her head on Naruto's shoulder after they had been quite a distance away. Narukoi, I told you that I can fight my own battles. If I don't start standing up for myself, then I will always be that shy little girl everyone seems to forget. Naruto simply grinned and gave her a head kiss. I dunno. I kinda like the sound of that. I would get to have that shy little girl all to myself. Naruto stopped when Hinata stopped walking and giggled as Naruto put his arms around her tiny waist. She placed her hands on his cheeks and kissed him. Someone behind them cleared their throat, interrupting their private moment once more when they dispersed. Jiraiya was standing there grinning broadly. I hate to interrupt your very important business, but I thought I should tell you that I am taking you with me on a little training trip while I go looking for someone. It shouldn't be too long, maybe a few weeks or so, but make sure you pack enough to last you. Naruto glanced back at his stand-in sensei after glancing at the girl in his arms, who appeared somewhat devastated to learn that Naruto would be departing. Sorry Jiraiya sensei, but I'm not going anywhere without Nada. Either she goes with us or neither of us go. Jiraiya's eyebrows arched. So all it takes is you to get a girlfriend before you finally show me some respect, huh? Now are you sure you won't reconsider? I can't guarantee her safety? Naruto gave a nod, either both of us or nothing at all. After a few more seconds of hesitation, Jiraiya let out a sigh. Alright, fine. You really have it bad for her, don't you? Naruto gazed at the girl he was holding. He gave her a quick kiss while grinning. You have no idea. A tiny gagging motion was made by Jiraiya. Alright, enough with the mushy crap. You have 2 hours to pack your things and meet me by the front gates. Everything's already cleared with the council and I just told your sensei, but it's up to you two to tell Hiashi as a reward for actually being respectful. I'll inform Kurenai that we will be taking her student with us. See you two soon. Jiraiya vanished in yet another leaf whirl. Hinata gave Naruto a quick peck on the lips as she looked up at him. Naruto, that was really kind of you. I don't think I can endure being apart from you for so long now that I have you. Let's go tell my father about our journey. Naruto realized that Hinata had only stated that they were leaving, with or without his consent, and that she had not mentioned that they would ask for his permission to do so. A few people gave them odd looks as they walked hand in hand back to the compound, and they discussed the types of training they believed Jiraiya would be providing. Hinata promised him that she would keep him in line this time or there would be jukins to some very private areas after Naruto gently warned her about the perverts. Research. Soon after, they arrived at the compound and passed the same guards from the previous day. Naruto smirked as they passed by. Pale once more and standing at full attention, they marched down the corridors until they reached Hiashi's study's elaborate door, and Hinata entered after a single knock. Looking up from his desk, Hiashi saw his oldest daughter enter the room with her fiancé at her side. The words made him shudder, and he didn't think he would ever be able to accept the Uzumaki as a son-in-law. When he defeated Neji in the Chunin exams, he demonstrated that he was a respectable shinobi, so he had no trouble accepting him as such. However, he could never accept him as a Hyuga, especially one who would eventually lead a clan. Hinata, I guess congratulations are in order for your victory this morning as promised. I am currently filling out the necessary forms to reinstate you as heiress. Shallowly, Hinata bowed. Arigato to-san. The reason I am here is to inform you that Naruto and I will be traveling with Jiraiya of the Sannin for an extended period of time for individualized training. We leaving in 90 minutes and will be away for approximately 3 weeks. Hiashi was incredulous first. He had been trying to get his daughter to stand up to him for years, but she seemed to grow a backbone overnight. Then, in a spar, she she annihilated her sister, who had defeated her in all 4 of the previous spars. She is now informing him that she will be traveling for personal training with a Sannin. Hiashi, who had spent the last day trying to figure out why Hinata had suddenly improved in every way, looked at the blonde boy who was holding her hand. Perhaps, Uzumaki, there is still a place for you in the Hyuga. Hiashi nodded his head and cleared his throat. Very well, I will have several changes of clothes already in a scroll brought for you both and another scroll with emergency rations. I trust that you will use this very rare opportunity to learn as much as you can from one of the most famous and skilled ninja this village has ever produced. Hiashi was still praising his sensei, and Naruto couldn't help but snort a little from his chest. Hiashi gave the blonde a narrowed look. Is there a problem, Uzumaki? After gathering himself, Naruto bowed. No, Hiashi-sama. I just find it humorous to put Ero Sennin up on a pedestal like that. Hyuga, the elder, raised an eyebrow. Ero Sennin? If that is the way you refer to Jiraiya Dono, then I take it that you know him on a more personal level. The blonde gave a head nod. Yes, I have known Ero Sennin for about a month now. He was the one who trained me when Kakashi tried to pawn me off on this guy named Ebisu. Jiraiya is like the perverted uncle I never had. And even though he's a little quirky, I can tell he cares about me a lot, so I meant no disrespect earlier. I just honestly found it funny. Hiashi blinked. Now he claims to be personally acquainted with one of the most influential shinobi of our time? It is possible that you have a place in our clan. I see. Well, I will let you two prepare for your journey then. Naruto and Hinata bowed and walked away. And Hinata? Once more, the girl turned to face her father. Stay safe. The girl was only able to nod slowly as her mouth opened slightly. Hi, To-san. After exiting the room and shutting the door, they headed back to Hinata's room still in a daze. Hinata was unable to distinguish whether her father was making fun of her by calling her weak and urging her to stay safe, or if he was attempting to show concern by telling her to look out for herself. His tone gave her the uneasy feeling that it was the first of the two possibilities. Hey, Nada. How are you? You appear to be thinking about something. After opening her room's door, Hinata went to her bed, sat down, and gazed at the floor. Yes, I'm all right. I'm just a little worn out. After approaching her and sitting down beside her, Naruto pulled her into an embrace and planted a kiss on her head, saying, "You're a terrible liar, Nada." He was grinning down at her when she looked up, and she said, "Sorry, Naruto, just a lot on my mind." "You don't have to tell me," Naruto said, laughing and kissing her on the lips. "Remember that I'm available if you need me. I'm going to take a shower now because we never know when we'll get another one." Hinata watched him enter the bathroom, and as the door shut, she collapsed back onto her bed, letting out a joyful sigh and giving thanks to whoever was keeping an eye on her for these wonderful and novel changes. An hour later, as they stood by the gates, Naruto and Hinata were chatting happily about their various recollections of the academy, and Naruto was shocked to learn that Hinata was familiar with most of his stories, mainly because she had witnessed most of them unfold from the shadows. They halted their conversation when they heard someone next to them clear his throat. "Are you prepared? This is your final opportunity to change your mind. I'll be training the two of you into the ground whenever we're not searching for our target or relaxing. This isn't just a vacation. I'll ask again. Are you two prepared?" "You bet." Naruto glanced at Hinata, who took his hand in hers. There were no clouds in the sky, the sun was shining, the birds were chirping, and one Hinata Hyuga was more irate than she had ever been in her life. It was a beautiful day. 3 hours have passed since they left Konoha, during which time they have reviewed all of their shinobi knowledge. Jiraiya asked them to describe their experiences, their abilities, their jutsu repertoire, and even their familiarity with shinobi history and current affairs. He started putting them through specific scenarios and evaluating their strategic knowledge based on their answers. Once he had a firm grasp on their individual combat skills overall, the 2 hours had been very fruitful, and each of them gained a great deal of self-awareness. However, that was the issue. He hadn't learned anything from his old sensei in the 6 months that Naruto had been trained, with the exception of the month that Jiraiya had done so. This was the cause of Hinata's present attitude. "Naruto, let me get this straight. The only thing your sensei personally taught you relating to fighting had been tree walking?" Naruto nodded sheepishly. He had never seen Hinata so angry before, and until recently, he believed that she was physically incapable of becoming angry. You can only imagine how shocked he was when she uttered a very un-Hyuga-like curse with the biggest smile on his face. Jiraiya simply observed the two, and he found himself rapidly becoming receptive to the notion of bringing the girl along. Nada?" She forced a smile and inhaled deeply several times. "Gomen Narukoi, I'm not mad at you. I'm just very upset with the carelessness of your other sensei." With a mental sigh of relief, Naruto realized that Hinata's addition of that small suffix to his name indicated that she was composed enough to talk sense into his head. He couldn't help but notice parallels between Hinata's behavior and his father's, but fortunately he was wise enough to keep them to himself. Naruto approached his irate fiancée and gave her a hug. "Nada, don't be upset. It really isn't worth it here, and now we have each other and Ero Sennin, so it's really not worth spending the time to be upset." "Damn Gaki," was the subject of a complaint somewhere behind them. With a sigh, Hinata returned the blonde's hug. "Naruto, I know what you mean, but you have to understand just how serious this is. We're shinobi, trained killers, so if you aren't trained, then someone else will be able to kill you." Kakashi wasn't just playing favorites, Naruto. He was sentencing you to death. It might not have been his intention, but you could have been killed while on one of your missions because you weren't taught how to properly defend yourself. As she spoke, a tear streamed down her eyes. "I can't stand to lose you, not now, not when I am finally able to tell you how much I love you." To emphasize his point, Naruto drew back a little and gave her a smile and a kiss. "Nada, I swear to you here and now, that no one, not even the Shinigami himself, will take me from you." With a happy smile, Hinata closed her eyes halfway and threw her arms around the blonde's neck, giving him a passionate kiss that seemed to be worth a lot. After about 30 seconds, they finally broke apart, their foreheads touching and their eyes meeting as they caught their breath. Unfortunately, the third person in their party interrupted their heartwarming moment. "Holy shit, You guys are gold mines. Naruto turned to face his sensei, who was writing frantically on a notepad while sporting reading glasses. Hey, Gaki, what was the last part of your final statement? I didn't quite catch that whole bit about the Shinigami. Naruto gave the Sannin a fierce look. Shove it, Arrow Sennin, don't you use this as your material for your disgusting books. The girl in Naruto's arms tensed up a little and spoke in a very low voice. You wouldn't be that Jiraiya, the one responsible for those books called Icha Icha? Jiraiya's chest puffed out. Why, yes I would, little lady, are you a fan? I don't usually do autographs, but I guess I can make an exception since you two are helping me OUPFH. His hands flew down to cradle his freshly kicked privates as whatever he was about to say got stuck in his throat, slumping to his knees. He was able to meet Hinata's glaring eyes, and she took his hair in her hand before drawing his eyes up to meet hers. Listen here, you old pervert, I don't care how powerful you are, or if you are one of the Sannin, but if you ever use this for that piggish filth you call a book, I'll make sure that one of these days you wake up and find that you have more in common with women than you ever thought you would. Do I make myself clear? Jiraiya's eyes grew wide, and he tightened his hold on his privates to confirm that they were still there. Yes, ma'am. Hinata let go of him and allowed him to fall to the ground after wiping her hands. She turned to Naruto and grinned sweetly. Well, we should get going, Naru-koi. Naruto nodded and swallowed. High. At the Hyuga compound, Hiashi was enjoying a cup of his favorite jasmine tea while seated in his study once more. He had just completed the final document that would formally establish Hinata's heiress status. His oldest daughter's transformation pleased him, and he has even begun to reconcile with her fiancé. At least Hinata had made the decision out of love, even though it was still unsettling to think that she had selected that specific shinobi to be her future husband, to love and support her as she carried on the Hyuga tradition. He had heard far too many tales of clan members taking their own lives after being forced into an unwelcome marriage. I am grateful that Kami is at least a strong shinobi. He excelled in the Chunin exams, and to top it all off, he defeated Suna Jinchuriki in a fight later that day. A brief knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Hiashi was aware that his presence was necessary because he was only ever disturbed from his study when the council decided to meet. Enter. A young girl with a piece of cloth wrapped around her forehead bowed as the door slowly slid open. Lord Hiashi, the Elder Council has requested their presence at your earliest convenience. Hiashi let out a sigh. He suspected that this would occur eventually. I see. Did they inform you of the nature of this meeting? The woman gave a headshake. Gomen Hiashi-sama, but they did not. The elder Hyuga cursed in his head. Obviously not. Hinata must be the subject of this. Inform the council I will be there momentarily. The woman backed out of the room and bowed. Hi, Hiashi-sama. Hiashi straightened his robe and smoothed out the wrinkles. A family portrait of Hanabi's wife, who was still alive at the time of Hanabi's birth, caught his attention. He picked up the photograph and gave his late wife's figure a gentle pat. Hitomi, if only you were here, none of this would be happening. You always had a knack for bringing out the best in people, and not a day goes by where I don't miss you. With a sigh, he placed the photo back on his desk, controlling his feelings and hiding them behind his Hyuga mask in a place with multiple whole families. It was a rare coincidence that he arrived at the council chambers without encountering anyone else. As he approached his destination and slid the door open, he was greeted by a humorous scene. There, each council member was debating why their son ought to be matched with the new heiress. The clan head had entered the room and was getting more and more irate by the second, but none of them were paying enough attention to notice. Hiashi finally had enough. Quiet, you fools. At last, everyone became aware of him and immediately fell silent. Now, would someone like to tell me why I have been summoned like some lapdog? The reason had better be important, or there will be consequences. Gomen, the elder who refereed the spar the other day, got to his feet. This is an important reason indeed, Hiashi Dono. It involves the very future of the Hyuga, and whether or not we are on a path to ruin. Jimin, an older woman, rose to her feet. Yes, this is to determine how to counteract the results of earlier today. Hiashi let out a sigh. I wasn't aware that yesterday's results needed to be countered. The results of the spar from today were quite clear, and as Hyuga we are honor-bound to honor those consequences. Hinata was victorious, and as such she has been made heiress once again. I have already completed the steps necessary to make this official, so there is nothing more to discuss. Gomen laughed. How is it that for the past 5 years your eldest has lost every single spar against Hanabi, and yet she is so easily able to bat her aside like dealing with a child? What is it you are trying to say, elder? Asked Hiashi, the man, with narrowed eyes. Despite a slight flinch, the elderly man refused to back down. Everyone here is thinking it, and I am merely voicing those thoughts. The demon has corrupted your eldest, somehow giving her some new demonic strength which she used to win her duel. Hiashi glanced around the room and noticed that almost every elder, including his own mother, was nodding their heads in agreement. Even you have fallen to their propaganda, Ka-san? Dento, an elderly woman with long white hair and a weary face, looked down in embarrassment. I'm sorry, Hiashi, but the facts are irrefutable. There is no other explanation other than what has been stated. I love Hinata very much, but I can't let her steer the Hyuga towards a path of ruin. Hiashi gave a disgusted shake of his head. Well, I for one will, and that is all that matters. Jimin's previous woman snorted. What has brought about this newfound change in you, Hiashi Dono? Not a week ago you were supporting our every action in making Hanabi heiress, yet here you are placing yourself vehemently against us. Why? The head of the clan sighed. My eyes have been opened to what I have been blind to for these many years. Hinata is strong. She proved that yesterday when she obliterated Hanabi. We all know that was her own power, and no one else's. Do you really think Naruto would have been able to supply her with strength in the middle of a spar? We all had our Baikugans active, and I know there wasn't a drop of the Kyuubi's power used in that fight, unless you all forgot what his power looked like from 13 years ago. Gomen got to his feet furiously. You dare to challenge our memory? We all lost family to that beast, and no one will ever forget the feeling of pure evil it radiated. Hiashi grinned. Good, then you all know that it wasn't used at all today. The fact of the matter is, Hinata created her own style of juken that allowed her to toy with Hanabi like a cat would with a mouse. Hinata has been holding herself back for years, and now no one, not even me, know her true capabilities. She might be able to go toe to toe with any one of us, and with her new style, might be able to even emerge victorious. Hiashi wasn't done, though there were a few whispers in the room. I'll admit, I wasn't ready to welcome the Uzumaki into our home either, but you must approach this from an open point of view. We have a rare opportunity, one that hasn't happened to any other clan in Konoha's history. We have a chance to incorporate the Uzumaki into our clan. Furious, Gomen stomped his foot. You would defile our blood with that. Dento interrupted him. Silence, Gomen, let my son explain his reasoning. Hiashi grinned. We have all heard the stories of the Uzumaki clan of Uzushiogakure. In the last war they fought against the combined might of Kumo, Iwa, and several lesser nations, and they almost emerged victorious. Their sacrifice allowed us to mobilize our forces and win the war, but there were few Uzumaki survivors. Their name alone holds weight all across the elemental nations, and I'm sure there is some sort of heritage for Naruto to claim, since he is the heir to both Uzushiogakure and the nation of Uzu itself. So tell me, if you oppose the heir to a nation and a village as a husband to my daughter, who else would you have stand by my daughter's side as she leads our clan? The room was filled with even more nods. It was time to put the last nail in the coffin because Hiashi knew he had them nearly cornered. Playing with their pride was time. And now they are both under the tutelage of one of the most powerful ninja our village has ever produced, Jiraiya the Gama Sennin, one of the legendary Sannin. When she returns she will be far stronger than previously, and now she has the backing of one of the more influential members of this village. From what I see, there is no one better to lead our clan to new levels of power and prestige than Hinata. And every single one of these changes were brought about by the young Uzumaki. Gomen surveyed the space. He had one more card to play, even though he knew he would never be able to persuade the council to brand Hinata at this point. You say Hinata hasn't been corrupted by the demon yet, but who is to say it won't happen in the future? What of their children? I can't seem to think that the power of the Kyuubi won't infect any future heirs. Hiashi laughed. Well, if it does, then we will see what happens when the power of the mightiest beast in history is mixed with the power of the mightiest dojutsu. I don't envy the position of any enemy my grandchildren might have, because I for one don't want to be on the receiving end of that combination of raw power. Dejected, Gomen took a seat again. Despite his desire for power, he was not a moron. He was all too well aware that the elders would do anything, including sacrificing the position of the next clan head, to increase the Byakugan's power. After a few more minutes of the elders whispering to each other in low tones, Dento got back up. I think I speak for the majority here that the points my son has brought before the council are more than adequate to recognize Hinata as heiress and Naruto as her fiancé. With a sigh of relief, Hiashi got to his feet. I'm glad the council has seen reason now. I must get back to making the final preparations for the marriage between Uzumaki Naruto and my daughter. Only a few elders remained after he left the room, and they filed out one by one. Gomen turned to the other elders. We can't let this happen. It'll destroy us all. Jimin gave a headshake. As much as I want to agree with you, I just can't refute what Hiashi said. We can't do anything anymore, so we might as well make the most of what we can and pray Hinata won't destroy the old traditions. Igo Izumu, an elderly-looking man, rose to his feet. I agree with Jimin. We have lost the backing of the council, and now the only option left to us is work with Hinata and attempt to decrease the number of changes she will make now, I believe we should all get some rest, it's been a very tiring day. Gomen was eventually the only one remaining. No, I won't go down easily, not now, not when I'm so close. He stepped out of the council chambers to see what he could do to turn this dire situation around. In the Fujisado town, after roughly 6 hours of driving, the three of them arrived at their first stop, the tiny town of Fujisado, which is well known for its underground casinos, festivals, and hot springs. Although Jiraiya focused his search for his missing teammate on several towns and places where she had been spotted, finding her would undoubtedly take some time. They proceeded directly to the closest hotel. After passing through the front gate, Jiraiya came to a halt and gave Hinata a small bundle of currency. Go ahead and get us a room while I start asking around for Tsunade. I don't have enough money for 2 rooms, so it looks like you two are sharing a bed, but I don't think you two mind, do you? After blushing, Naruto led Hinata into the hotel by taking her hand. Damn pervert. Hinata simply grinned. She admitted to feeling a little ashamed, but she wouldn't deny that she didn't mind sleeping with the blonde. Jiraiya simply chuckled before leaving to start posing questions around town. Let's go, Nada, you don't want to know where he's going, dirty old man. Hinata laughed. Well, since he's gone, why don't we shower and have a night out? Naruto stopped and turned to face her again. You mean like a date? Hinata merely chuckled. Well, I think we kinda skipped the dating phase, so this can just be a night we get to enjoy ourselves. The fact that he had ruined the night that most girls dreamed of, the night that they would remember forever, the night they made a lifelong commitment to one person, made Naruto feel guilty. He sensed that she harbored some resentment because he had taken away that priceless moment. Even though he knew it wasn't true, he was aware that this was absurd. But when the mind wanders, it can come to some absurd conclusions. If he couldn't fix this tonight, he knew he would do it soon. Naruto forced a grin. Alright, sounds like fun, let's go get ready. After just 20 minutes, Naruto and Hinata were leaving the hotel once more, feeling clean and rejuvenated since they had arrived before their customary lunch. They strolled hand in hand around the town in search of food. Hinata came to a stop as they were crossing the street. Wait, there's a nice-looking sushi restaurant, how does that sound, Naruto? With a shrug, Naruto turned to face the ground. That doesn't sound too bad, but I was kinda hoping for ramen or something. Hinata let out a sigh. I'm sorry, Naruto, but you need to diversify your diet. Ramen is okay every now and then, but you can't live solely on that. How about this? We have this for lunch and then we can find somewhere that has ramen for dinner, okay? Squeezing the life out of Hinata, Naruto drew her in for a firm embrace. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're going to be the best wife ever, Nada. Ignoring the hug that broke her bones, Hinata simply blushed. She still harbored the suspicion that she had coerced him into doing something he didn't truly want, and this was the first time Naruto had stated that he was actively looking forward to their marriage. The lunch itself was straightforward, but it was tasty and satisfying, exactly what the two of them needed after 2 days of traveling and eating only plain rice and beans. Following that, they visited stores and engaged in some window shopping while simply spending the night together. Even though there weren't many of the things that caught her eye, Hinata was disappointed that she didn't have enough cash on hand to actually purchase any of them. She could charge the Hyuga clan for them, but she didn't want to put herself in any more danger just yet. She was unaware that Naruto carried nearly all of his life savings. During his lifetime, Hiruzen taught Naruto many lessons, including the extreme value of money and how to store all of his mission earnings in a seal on his arm. In addition to the numerous D-ranked tasks that Team 7 completed during the several months off prior to the start of the Chunin exams, that amount had grown significantly since the Wave mission was promoted to an A-ranked mission. Hiruzen was shocked to learn that Naruto was extremely frugal with his money and could be extremely frugal when he so desired. Hiruzen was pleased that his adopted grandson was heeding his teachings, and he could only imagine Naruto's expression when he became Chunin and learned he had enough money left over from his parents to purchase nearly half of Hai no Kuni. Together, they had a wonderful afternoon, and when the sun set, they were pleasantly surprised to learn that the town was also having a fireworks show that evening. The festival was reportedly held in honor of the harvest god, which is a significant occasion for the town, particularly since the wheat harvest is just a few weeks away. In mid-August, they found a little stand that sold ramen to sat the blonde's insatiable appetite. Just as she had promised, Naruto and Hinata eventually arrived in the town square, where a bamboo dance floor was already swaying to the music and there was soft music playing. Naruto was hesitant, but Hinata drew him over to the dance floor because she was thrilled about the opportunity to dance with him. Wait, Nada. She stopped, and she smiled impatiently at him. What is it? He shuffled his feet and flushed. I don't know how to dance. Hinata shut her eyes and gave herself a mental slap once more. She had assumed Naruto had a similar upbringing to her own and had taken something for granted. He had no one to teach him these things, and she kept forgetting that. Hinata squeezed his hand reassuringly. "It's okay Naruto, just follow my lead and do as I do, I'll teach you." Instead of dancing, she opted to sway to the music with him, but the way they were together felt more right. He put his head on hers and his hands clasped over her waist, while she put her arms around his neck and her head on his shoulder. They spun in a never-ending circle, happy to lose themselves in the languid rhythms and just spend time together. They both understood that these quiet times were uncommon in a ninja's life, but that only added to their specialness. Because they had been dancing for so long, Hinata was finally starting to nod off, and Naruto only needed to hear her soft yawns to take her in his arms and carry her back to the hotel. The two received a lot of admiring glances as people observed two young teenagers in love during the brief stroll, which Naruto wished had lasted longer. When Naruto finally arrived at the hotel, he went to their room and placed Hinata on the bed before tucking her in. The sound of her mumbling his name while she slept made him smile as he observed her sleeping form. However, there was one thing that was making him cry. The primary reason he pushed her away and asked her to wait was because he still hadn't told her about it. Despite the fact that she had nearly surrendered to him, he still needed to explain the Kyuubi to her. He decided it would be best to tell her to leave Konoha because he knew that if he didn't do it now, it would only lead to more lies and problems later. She would genuinely have time out here to consider what he had told her, and if it worked out, she might even decide to end their relationship. He put a very gentle hand on her shoulder and roused her from her sleep. "Nada, wake up sleepy." Naruto's breath caught in his throat as her eyes opened, revealing eyes that had captured his heart. "Naruto, where are we?" He removed a bang from her face while grinning. "You started to fall asleep, so I brought you back there. There's something I need to tell you though." When Hinata heard the doubt and fear in his voice, she jolted to consciousness. "Naruto, what's wrong?" His gaze shifted to the floor. "Do you remember what you promised me? The promise that you would never leave me, that you would always love me, no matter what?" Hinata gave a nod. Yes, I remember." "Naruto, what is it? You're starting to scare me." His eye dropped a tear. Do you remember what they taught us about the Kyuubi, about the Yondaime's sacrifice 13 years ago?" Hinata let out a mental sigh. "Yes, I remember, but, Naruto, His hand touched her mouth. Just hold on a second, Nada, I need to finish. I need to tell you that it was all." She took his hand away. "Naruto, it's okay, I already." Naruto began to lose patience. "Just hold on a second. This is really hard for me, I'm trying to say." Hinata covered his mouth this time. "Naruto, I already know, I've already known for a while." She eventually withdrew her hand to allow Naruto to speak after he simply stared at her. You already know? But, how?" With a sigh, she started to describe how she had discovered the connection between Naruto's birthday and the Kyuubi festival back in the academy. She also researched the myths surrounding the Biju and how they would die, only fade away for a few years before resurfacing. However, since the Kyuubi hadn't been seen in almost 150 years, there were some questions that the coincidence brought up. Then she learned about Jinchuriki, the power of human sacrifice, which would forever alter her perception of her blonde crush. She was able to piece together the facts of what had happened all those years ago with ease because of all the comments made about Naruto by the villagers and the way he was treated. There was a long period of silence during which Naruto simply gazed at the ground. "So, what do you think?" Hinata raised her gaze to the blonde. "What do you mean?" Naruto's eyes were watering as he gazed at her. "I'm sure many Hyugas died when the Kyuubi attacked, so do you hate me? Do you blame me for their deaths? I wouldn't blame you if you did. I mean, I basically am the Kyuubi, so I could understand if." Hinata pulled him into her mouth by grabbing the hem of his robes to put an end to whatever he was about to say. She used her tongue to force his mouth open and gave him a passionate kiss. She held him as long as she could before gasping for breath. With their foreheads pressed together and both of them panting, Hinata grinned and kissed him again. "Naruto, we both know you aren't the Kyuubi, and even if you were, I still wouldn't care. I fell in love with that little blonde boy who saved me from those bullies when I was a little girl, the same boy that shared with me his nindo, who showed me that no matter what, hard work and determination will always triumph over natural talent. I fell in love with that boy. And whether you call yourself Kyuubi or Naruto, I couldn't care less. I just want to be with you." As he crawled to her bedside and held her close to him, Naruto shed happy tears onto his face. He slept with the only person he would ever love, the only person he would ever give his heart to, and he couldn't have asked for a better place to be. And after an evening that only strengthened their bond, they slept there, in the arms of their significant other. The only negative aspect of the whole evening was when they unintentionally encountered a slightly inebriated Jiraiya entering what looked to be a brothel. When the Sannin saw Naruto in his slightly inebriated state, he offered to have someone train him before his wedding night with Hinata. She obviously made it clear that no one else would touch Naruto, and when Jiraiya's privates met her foot in a vertical handshake, they clearly heard her message. Against Jiraiya's wishes, they all got up early the following morning and left town. They set out to find Tsunade after Jiraiya's actions the previous evening led him to realize that she was not in that town around mid-morning. They paused at a clearing for the training Jiraiya had promised. "Alright you two. At the rate we're going it's a 2-day walk to our next location. We are going to walk from sunrise till noon, and then stop for training." After letting his bag fall to the ground, he approached a tree and picked a few leaves from its branches. He went over to give the leaves to Hinata. He demonstrated by placing a leaf between his eyes on his head and said, "Now that you've mastered tree climbing and water walking, I want you to do a chakra training exercise. You take a leaf and use your chakra to keep it stuck to your forehead. Now, to make this a little more difficult, every time you manage to get a leaf to stick, I want you to place another leaf above one of your tenketsu." With a raised eyebrow, Hinata accepted the handful of leaves. "Why above a tenketsu? Why not just put more on my head?" Jiraiya gave a shoulder shrug. "I didn't want to directly say it, but I've had a theory about blocking the famous Jukin of the Hyuga, and you are the perfect person to test this theory now. What is Jukin in essence besides a taijutsu form?" In order to try the exercise, Naruto approached the heap of leaves and placed one on his forehead. He pouted, and Hinata giggled, as the leaf blew off with amazing speed when he released his chakra focus at the point. "Well, I guess it's forcing chakra into an opponent's tenketsu, shutting them down temporarily and blocking the flow of chakra through that tenketsu." Jiraiya gave a nod. "Precisely. Now what would happen if someone was able to completely control every one of their tenketsu? What would that mean to those who use Jukin?" Hinata let out a gasp. The entire fighting style would be rendered useless since the opponent could push chakra out of that tenketsu point and block the opponent's chakra. Sannin, the elder, grinned. "Correct, but you're still thinking too small. If someone was to master control of their tenketsu, and had a large enough chakra capacity, then they would be able to continuously push a steady stream of chakra out of their tenketsu during a fight, making them invulnerable to virtually all attacks." Hinata grinned. She would be as strong as Tsunade, who is regarded as one of the strongest kunoichi in the world, if she could accomplish what he was describing. "And you think I can do this?" Jiraiya's grin vanished. "I can't say. I'm not sure if you would have the chakra capacity to fully utilize this technique like Naruto could, but he just doesn't have the control necessary. Unlike you, if you two would just merge then you would make the ultimate ninja. But I guess there is a way you two can merge." Ignoring the twisted statement, Naruto took Hinata's hand. "I don't care what anyone says, Nata. I have no doubt in my mind that you'll be able to do this. You just have to try." Grinning, Hinata picked up a leaf and placed it on her forehead. "Thank you Narukoi. I'll get this technique down or I'll die trying." Nervously, the blonde laughed. "Well, I mean, try and all, but don't kill yourself, please." Hinata grinned. "I wouldn't dream of it." Squeezing her hand, Naruto leaned in to kiss her. While slightly closing his eyes he watched Hinata follow suit, and it was obvious that she shared his desire to feel his lips on her own. However, before they could do so, someone behind them cleared their throat, making them recoil. "As touching as this is, you both have training to do. This isn't a vacation or a honeymoon, this is a mission." Though they both blushed, Naruto and Hinata realized that he was correct and that they would have more time to spend together later. Naruto approached Jiraiya and made a small bow. "Sorry, I got carried away, and I distracted Hinata. I promise it won't happen again when we're training." Jiraiya gave an eye roll. Naruto nodded and said, "Cut the formal crap, just pay more attention, okay? Okay, now make about, oh, well, as many clones as you can." After nodding, Naruto took a few moments to collect his chakra and form a cross with his fingers. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, multiple shadow clone technique. The training area was immediately filled with Narutos as far as the eye could see. After there was a puff of smoke, Jiraiya appeared pleased as Hinata's jaw fell, and he attempted to count them for a few seconds before growing weary and giving up. "Oi Gaki, about how many clones do you think there are?" After giving it some thought, Naruto shrugged. "I dunno, maybe 200, around that." Jiraiya gave a nod. "Okay, now Naruto, do you know why this is a forbidden technique?" Jiraiya proceeded after Naruto shook his head. "Well, the chakra toll this technique places on the body is very heavy, and most Chunin are only able to make maybe 2 or 3 before it starts to get dangerous. You are an exception due to your situation and heritage as an Uzumaki, who are all gifted with abnormally high chakra reserves." Naruto's gaze expanded. you know about my family. Jiraiya cursed himself in his head for allowing that one to get away with it. Yeah, I know a bit about them, and I'll tell you everything I know in due time, but for now focus on your training, okay? Naruto gave an enthusiastic nod. Okay, now the major benefit to this technique is obviously having solid copies of yourself with complete chakra networks, which means that they will be able to use every single jutsu you yourself know. The other benefit is the reason I had you make so many clones. Naruto's head cocked. What other benefit? With a smile, Jiraiya motioned for a clone to follow him. Come with me, but the real Naruto stay there. Both the clone and the real Naruto shrugged as they exchanged glances. The real Naruto was unable to see Jiraiya and the clone because they were walking several steps behind him. But the clone's patience was wearing thin. Oi, arrow Senin, what are we doing out her oomph? The Sannin punched the clone hard in the gut, causing it to immediately expel itself. Naruto pivoted and gestured accusingly at his sensei. Oi, what the hell do you think you're doing? Jiraiya grinned. What's wrong, Gaki? Naruto gave him a fierce look. What do you mean what's wrong? You nailed him in the gut. Jiraiya simply kept grinning. And how do you know that? You were turned completely the other way. Naruto continued to glare while shrugging his shoulders. I don't know, I guess I got his memories or something like that, but it doesn't matter. You. Wait, I got his memories? Sannin, the elder, clapped his hands. It looks like you figured it out. When a cage bunshin expels itself, all its memories and experiences, everything it learned over the course of its lifetime is sent back to the original and incorporated into Naruto's own memories. So if you train with, let's say 200 clones for about 6 hours, you would do the same amount of work as another person doing that same training for about 50 days straight. A huge smile spread across Naruto's face. I can learn so much. I can literally learn everything in the Konoha library in a single day. This is incredible. After she recovered from her initial shock, Hinata made the decision to speak up. Narukoi could fit entire years' worth of training into mere weeks. Jiraiya gave Hinata a fierce look. Oi, did I tell you to stop? With a wince, Hinata resumed covering her tenketsu with leaves. No, Jiraiya-sensei. After observing her for a few more seconds, Jiraiya returned his focus to Naruto. Okay, now that you know the benefits, you can apply it to training. Just remember, this only works for things you can learn, meaning jutsu, strategy, chakra control exercises, things you have to remember with your brain. It has no effect whatsoever on physical endurance or things of that sort, so you will still need to keep yourself on a harsh physical regimen, but for now I want you all to focus on water walking. Just focus chakra on the bottom of your foot. Like tree climbing, it'll be more difficult since the surface of the water will change, so you're going to have to fluctuate the amount of chakra on the bottom of your foot constantly. Now get to it. I want you to practice for about 2 hours, then dispel your clones. The training grounds were filled with the sound of "hi" as Jiraiya went to take a nap under the shade of a nearby tree. A very wet Naruto with the biggest smile on his face jolted Jiraiya awake. Arrow Senin. I dispelled all the clones after 2 hours like you said, and I got a huge headache, but then when I went to try the exercise again, it was like I could do it all along. These cage bunshins are a sign from Kami that I'm going to be a great ninja. Jiraiya complained a little and removed the wax from his ear with a finger. Yeah, sure Gaki, sure. He produced a tiny piece of paper from his pocket and gave it to the blonde, who cocked his head. What's this? Jiraiya's eyebrows arched. What do you mean, what's this? Hinata approached Naruto and put a hand on his shoulder just as he opened his mouth to speak. Jiraiya-sensei, Naruto wasn't in class when we learned about chakra paper. Iruka-sensei was sick that day, so when the lesson started, Mizuki-sensei sent Naruto out of the room while he taught it. Jiraiya blinked. Wait a second, you mean Naruto was purposely made to leave the room while one of the teachers had you all test your elemental affinities? Hinata nodded while wearing a humiliated expression. Hi, no one said anything because we didn't want to get in trouble. I'm sorry, Naruto. Naruto gave a shrug. It's alright, Nada, we're fixing it now, so it's okay. No harm down, right? As Tsunade became the next Hokage, Jiraiya swore under his breath that he would personally see to it that things change. Well Gaki, this here is what is called chakra paper. It's made from trees that are fed on chakra in special nurseries and are used for the purpose of determining a person's elemental affinities. You have to channel chakra into the paper, and the way it responds tells you your particular affinity. Now be clear. Just because you don't have an affinity towards an element doesn't mean you can't learn it. It just means it'll be a whole lot harder and it'll need a lot more chakra. Now stand back so I can show you. After a few seconds of holding the paper in his palm, half of it turned to dirt and began to crumble, while the other half ignited and burned off. See that? It means I have 2 elemental affinities, fire, high, and Earth, Tsuchi, type chakra, meaning Kaden, fire release, and Doden, earth release, are very easy for me. You already know what fire and earth looks like, so if you have wind the paper will split in two, lightning the paper will wrinkle, water, the paper will become wet, damp. After giving it a nod, Naruto poured some chakra into the paper. When the paper was violently torn in two, Naruto jumped a little before it tore itself into oblivion. The blonde glanced at the bits of paper he was holding before turning to face his teacher, who was in disbelief. Arrow Sennin? Was it supposed to do that? Jiraiya gave a headshake. No Naruto, no it isn't. I guess maybe instead of having two affinities, your body just chose to superpowered one. What I just saw leads me to believe that you have one of the strongest, if not the strongest, wind, K's, chakra types I've ever heard of. Naruto simply pumped his arm and smiled. Did you hear that, Nada? I knew I was awesome. With a smile, Hinata raised another leaf and placed it on her arm, making 5 in all. Although she had made some good progress, she was quickly running out of chakra energy and would have to take a break unless she wanted to run the risk of chakra exhaustion. A sudden slap to the head, courtesy of Jiraiya, stopped Naruto's cheers. Listen here Gaki. Don't let this get to your head. You still have a whole lot of work to do before you are anything more than a nuisance to most shinobi. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and glared at the Sannin, but he understood his sensei's point of view. Being on a team with one of the world's most arrogant individuals, he had witnessed firsthand how pride could lead to one's death on the battlefield. Sorry Arrow Sennin, it's just I've been told for so long that I'm the dobi, or dead last, that I got excited when I found out I was actually going to be good at something. Jiraiya let out a sigh. Look kid, if it makes you feel better, I was the dead last of my class too. Hinata was also so shocked that she let all the leaves fall, and Naruto's eyes widened in shock. Regretfully, Jiraiya noticed her lack of focus. Oi, Gaki-et, good job on keeping it up for so long, but now you have to drop down and give me 100 push-ups, and then do 200 squat jumps, then repeat that, 5 times. Hinata's mouth dropped open, and she begged Naruto for assistance, to which he nodded. Arrow Sennin, isn't that a little harsh? Jiraiya laughed. It might be, but that is what my ex-teammate Tsunade made me do whenever we trained. She was a strength and stamina monster, and those 2 exercises were her bread and butter. Of course, she would eventually wear weights for added strength, but you get the picture, so hop to it. Naruto turned to face Hinata, who gave the ground a dejected expression when he saw Jiraiya grinning malevolently at him. Naruto stopped laughing at her anguish as she performed one push-up after another. Who said she would be doing this alone? With a gulp, Naruto moved to stand beside his fiancée. The following 2 days proceeded in the same fashion, with training in the afternoon and travel in the morning. Needless to say, Naruto and Hinata were both worn out. With the help of his clones, Naruto had fully mastered all forms of chakra control, and as he began his training in wind nature manipulation, he was now utilizing them to chop through leaves. Despite Naruto's repeated protests, Jiraiya remained true to his statement that he wanted him to understand the ins and outs of wind chakra before teaching him any new jutsu. Even with the clones, the progress was extremely slow, and Jiraiya told Naruto that Sarutobi Asuma, one of Konoha's more skilled futon, wind release, users, needed at least 3 months to finish this stage. Jiraiya had only taught Naruto the Shunshin, body flicker technique, as a jutsu technique, and that was only to silence him on the second night. Naturally, Jiraiya supplemented this training with physical training, and even with the Kyuubi's accelerated healing, the mental exhaustion of 200 clones and thousands of training hours added up to one exhausted genin. He was in better shape than Hinata when she achieved about 53 leaves, all of which were positioned over Tenketsu and held there with chakra. She had completed her leaf control exercise to the fullest extent possible. Though she still had a lot of growing to do before her chakra coils were fully developed, Jiraiya assured her that her reserves would increase rapidly as she continued her training. Regretfully, her reserves were too low to expel that much chakra all at once. Although she was still working on reproducing that ability with the smaller Tenketsu points, her chakra control was growing at an exponential rate, and she could expel her chakra out of all the major Tenketsu at any given time. She was eager to see the results of all her training, but she was also experiencing that workout soreness phase because she was still getting used to the physical side of training. She was equally exhausted physically, particularly because her team never placed much emphasis on the physical side of training. For this reason, the 2 worn-out shinobi were very happy to see their next stop emerge into view. At least 3 times the size of the tiny town of Fujisado, the city of Biratory was a striking sight. Jiraiya turned to his 2 students as they passed through the city gates. All right you two, Same drill, you guys go and get a hotel room for us while I look around for Tsunade. He started to take some cash out of his pocket to give to the two, but Naruto hurried over and took his hand instead. To whisper in the Sanin's ear, Naruto leaned over, "Arrow Senin, I'm planning on taking Hinata out somewhere very nice tonight, and I want it to be really special, but that doesn't really work when you come in at 3 drunk, so here." A big bundle of Ryo notes was thrust into the older man's hands by Naruto. "Can you just stay somewhere else, use the money to research and just give us a night alone? Please, just for tonight?" At his student's request, Jiraiya grinned, "Wow Gaki, never took you for the perverted type, but with a wifey like her I guess I can understand." With a flush, Naruto stumbled out a reply. "It isn't like that, you perv. I just want this night to be special without your drunken ass there." With a laugh, Jiraiya removed the cash from his pupil's grasp. "MMHMM, that's what they all say." The older man continued to laugh as he waved over his shoulder as he entered the city. "Don't get yourselves killed now." Hinata approached Naruto, who was complaining, "Naru-koi, why did you give Jiraiya-sensei money?" Taking her hand in his, Naruto started to move toward their best hotel in the city. "Well, I wanted some time where it's just the two of us without that perv. I wanted to have tonight just be us, without any distractions from him, where I get to treat you like a princess, like you should be." With a smile on her face, Hinata put her head on Naruto's shoulder and embraced him after turning to kiss the top of her head. Naruto laid his own on top of hers. Anyone walking down the street would have seen 2 teenagers strolling down the street, and they would have been absolutely correct. As they passed all of the less desirable hotels, where they would typically stay, Hinata observed, "Naru-koi, where are we going?" With a laugh, Naruto withdrew his arm from her hold and put it around her shoulders, drawing her nearer. "I told you, tonight is going to be special, and I can't really do that at a crappy little hotel like that now, can I?" Hinata grinned, enjoying her fiancé's more sentimental side, "But anywhere with you is special. It doesn't have to be somewhere fancy and expensive." Naruto tightened his grip and smiled. "No, I guess it doesn't, does it? But it definitely doesn't hurt either." After that, they entered a hotel with a spacious lobby that looked extremely elegant. The pathways were lined with large ornamental pillars, and the entire floor was composed of marble. A painted mosaic depicting the Showdown Hokage's battle with Uchiha Madara was displayed on the room's vaulted ceiling, which was adorned with a huge chandelier. Because they were both wearing their training gear, Naruto and Hinata were receiving stares from both the staff and other guests as they marveled at the hotel's sheer magnificence. Ignoring them, Naruto approached the front desk with his head held high and was met by a small man dressed in a suit. "Hello. My name is Uzumaki Naruto and this is my fiancée Hyuga Hinata. I request a room for us to stay in for the night." When he heard Hinata's name, the man stopped smirking at the couple. "Hey, are you the Hyuga Hinata? Heiress of the Hyuga clan?" Hinata nodded, grinning. "Yes, I am. Now would you be so kind as to ready the Hyuga suite for my fiancée and I to spend the night in?" As he sent off multiple bellhops to comply, the man bowed low. "Oh, of course, Hyuga-sama. Your room shall be ready momentarily." After giving a nod, Naruto escorted Hinata away from the desk. He arched an eyebrow at Hinata and gestured toward the check-in desk when they were alone once more, but she simply shrugged. "What? The Hyuga are famous in Hai no Kuni and Konoha. Especially with the fall of the Uchiha, we are highly respected and have many connections all throughout the elemental nations." Naruto grinned while nodding. "I guess you're right, I'm still getting used to the attention, I guess." With a smile, Hinata put her arms around his back and drew him close for a brief kiss. "Well, you better get used to it, mister, because you aren't going anywhere for a long time, understand me?" Naruto laughed and kissed her once more. "Yes, ma'am." In a bellhop uniform, a teenage girl with long brown hair and deep sea foam eyes walked up to the couple and bowed. "Your room has been readied for your use. All sheets and linens have been changed and the room was given a quick cleaning." Naruto's brows lifted. "What? Really? That sure was fast." Once more, the woman bowed. "The Hyuga suit is always kept in good condition, but whenever its use is called for it is taken as top priority, especially when there are guests involved with the Hyuga visiting." The way the girl was staring at her, Naruto bothered Hinata. Is she ashamed? "We're obviously together, in fact, we're encircling one another." Fortunately, Naruto was only staring at his fiancée when she turned to face him again, and they were escorted to their room. As they approached the elevator, Naruto withdrew his hand from Hinata's as the doors opened. She faced him. "What's wrong?" He created a cage bunshin with a smile and a cross-hand seal. The clone fled after the two Narutos exchanged glances and nodded. Then, taking Hinata's hand once more, Naruto entered the elevator. "Don't worry, Nada, he is just going to take care of something while we freshen up." Although Hinata knew he was trying to make this night truly unforgettable, she chose to ignore it and entered the elevator despite the fact that she could tell he was hiding something from her. Alongside Kage Bunshin, the Naruto Kage, hurried out of the hotel and headed toward the affluent area of the city. He was assigned a set number of crucial tasks that were essential to the night Naruto had planned. Being a success, he went to a restaurant first. But it wasn't just any restaurant, he envisioned it as a place that exuded class and culture, with a romantic atmosphere. He stopped outside a location known as Enju, and the vibes emanating from it seemed to be just what he was searching for. A small man wearing a very nice suit and tie stood at the front counter when he entered through the door. "May I help you, sir?" Naruto put on his best Hyuga impression, straightened up as high as he could, and nodded. "Yes, you may. I would like reservations for tonight at 6 p.m. sharp." The man let out a sigh. "I'm sorry, sir, but we won't be able to process reservations only 2 hours ahead. It takes weeks just to get a table here. I apologize, sir, but it just isn't possible." Naruto produced an impressive stack of bills after swiping a seal on his arm that permitted him to use actual currency. "Make it possible 6 p.m. sharp. Hyuga, Hinata and Uzumaki. Naruto." The man stiffened at the sound of Uzumaki, and his eyes widened when he recognized this name. Naruto was confused when the man shook his head after glancing at the bills. "Right away, sir. Your table shall be ready when you arrive." Grinning, Naruto thanked the man and walked away. "I believe I can adjust to this." Returning to the hotel in order to be shocked by Hinata's outfit, Naruto made the decision to be the first to shower. Fortunately, her father had the foresight to pack a suit for him and a formal set of robes for her in case such an occasion came up naturally. The hotel provided all the cosmetics that Hinata and Naruto would require during their stay, and Naruto was ecstatic about his good fortune in selecting this specific hotel. Who knew that the Hyuga always had a room here for the main family? He certainly didn't. He was currently waiting on a sofa in the suit's family room while Hinata got ready in the master bathroom in order to have enough time to complete his evening preparations. Naruto silently hoped she was one of those girls who took an hour to wash her hair. Fortunately, his clone informed Naruto that dinner was ready by creating another clone before dispelling. "Only 2 more things to do, and if those go off right, then this will be the best night of her life, I hope." He prayed in silence for his clone to hurry up and finish as he heard the shower shut off. Alongside Kage Bunshin, he was in a store that he never imagined he would ever enter. Still in the upscale area of the city, he simply believed that he would never need to be there, not because he didn't like what the store sold, but fate has a way of changing things. After more than 30 minutes of searching and examining each one they had, he was beginning to lose hope. He discovered it as he was ready to head to another store. Everything about it was ideal. It represented everything he wanted it to, and he knew she would adore it. One of the attendants who had been following him behind the counter the whole time was the one he looked up to. "I'll take this one, it's perfect." The woman at the counter chuckled. "Are you sure, little boy? It's very expensive. Now where are your parents? Are they in this store?" The smile vanished from Naruto's face since he hadn't yet experienced that male growth spurt. This wasn't the first time someone had mistaken him for a child, but he wasn't going to let this woman spoil his day. He presented the woman with his Hite 8. "I am a shinobi of Konohagakure. I am no more a child than you are, and I demand respect." The woman repeatedly bowed as she froze in terror. "Forgive me, sir. I was out of place. I apologize for any insults I may have said. I wasn't aware." Naruto let out a sigh. All he wanted was to be treated like everyone else and not to cause fear in others. "It's okay. I know I'm short for my age. Now, may I please buy this one?" The woman sighed with relief. Stories of shinobi venting their rage on people who have wronged them are all too common, particularly in light of the recent rise in missing nin. "Of course, sir, but are you sure? It's the most expensive one we have in the store?" Naruto produced multiple stacks of Ryo notes by swiping the seal on his arm. "I don't think that'll be a problem, ma'am." Returning to the hotel room as soon as Hinata emerged from the shower, Naruto's heart began to race in his chest and his eyes widened like saucers. He would never realize how fortunate he was to have been selected by the woman in front of him out of everyone on the planet. The height of human perfection was in front of him. Even though Hinata's hair was still shorter, he thought it was ideal because he typically preferred longer hairstyles. She applied minimal makeup, primarily a light layer of foundation to make her cheeks appear more flushed. She was dressed in a deep violet kimono with tiny flower branches all over it in addition to standing out against the darker kimono. The obi's lighter purple hue perfectly complemented her eyes' pale purple hue. The lump in his throat was eventually swallowed. "Nada, you look beautiful." Hinata briefly reverted to her bashful self and repeatedly pressed her fingers together. "Thank you, Narukoi, you look very handsome yourself." With a smile on his face, Naruto held out his hand. "Well, we should get going. Nada, I have the entire night planned for us, and I think you're going to love it." With a giggle, Hinata took his hand. Naruto, I would be happy if we just stayed in and had ramen. It's just being with you that makes it special. Naruto pretended to be sorry. Really, crap. I already had all this stuff set up when we could have had ramen. Guess I should cancel it. Hinata became a little alarmed. Wait, I was just joking, please take me out. With a laugh, Naruto planted a kiss on the tip of her nose. I know, Nada, I might be a little behind in the emotional department, but even I can take a hint. The Hyuga girl let out a sigh of comfort. Thank you, Kami. I knew I shouldn't have brought up ramen. He uses that stuff like a drug. She put her head on Naruto's shoulder and he hooked her arm in his. Well, my Heim, shall we start this wonderful night? She nodded on his shoulder and grinned as he left the hotel room. Naruto merely laughed. Alongside Kage Bunshin. Alright, this is the last stop, then everything will be perfect. He turned to face a petite woman wearing an apron at the front counter. Hello, young man, may I help you? Naruto gave a nod. Yes, I'm planning a special night for the most important woman in the world, and I need something that tells her I love her and only her. With a ah sound, the woman praised his romantic feelings. You know, not enough men have the guts to spend the time to properly romance a woman, whoever this young lady is. She is very lucky to have found you. Grinning and blushing, Naruto muttered something to himself. Well, actually it was the other way around. So, is there something you can tell me about her? Naruto paused to reflect. Well, her favorite color is purple. After giving it some thought, the woman behind the counter smiled widely. I have just the thing, stay right here. After vanishing through a door behind the counter, she returned a few seconds later carrying a vase filled with purple flowers. There are called lavenders. They represent love and fidelity, and personally I think these are the best flowers out there to show that so many people use roses that it's almost become a cliche, and the lavender has been really downplayed the last few years, so I don't think she'll be expecting it. Naruto picked up the flower and inhaled its scent. It had a subtle hint of Hinata's scent, and Naruto realized that he had to get her those flowers and use them at all costs. He returned the vase to her. So are these the only lavenders you have, or are there more? The female chuckled. Oh dear no, this store actually has a nursery out back and lavenders are the main flower grown there. For some reason Kumo is having a massive building project using lavenders. Something about preventing runoff while beautifying the mountains. With a simple smile, Naruto withdrew multiple large stacks of bills and swiped the seal once more. Perfect, I'll take them all. Alongside Naruto, many people were observing them as he led Hinata through the streets. Delighted that there was such a youthful romance in the air, Hinata looked up when he eventually stopped outside of Enju. Enju? Where have I heard this name before? Is this that Enju? The most lucrative restaurant in all of High no Kuni. To be honest, Naruto was unaware of that small piece of knowledge. I guess it is. Nada. Now let's go in, it's almost 6. When they entered, the man from earlier noticed them, took 2 menus, and bowed to them. Uzumaki-sama. Hyuga-sama, I'm honored you two are able to join us tonight. Please follow me and I'll show you to your table. The man led the two to the rear of the restaurant after courteously gesturing for them to follow him. The ambiance was even better than Naruto had imagined. The harvest at the side of the restaurant created the ideal ambiance. The lights were dimmed but still provided enough light to see everyone at the table, and Naruto could tell by looking at the tables that this was just as elegant inside as it appeared. A man in an extremely expensive-looking suit was waiting for them in a back room with a single table. After they were shown through a door, Hinata glanced at Naruto, who simply shrugged. He, too, had no idea what was happening. The other man bowed when they got close. Good evening, Uzumaki-sama. Hyuga-sama, my name is Kokana Enju, the owner of this humble establishment, and I will be personally taking care of you two tonight. As the man pulled out Hinata's chair so she could sit down, Naruto nodded and thanked him. After that, Naruto sat down while their water glasses were being filled. Enju-san? I have a question for you if you don't mind? The man bowed and looked up. Of course, Uzumaki-sama, ask anything. Naruto was now quite perplexed. He had never experienced such treatment. Why is everyone taking care of us so well? Not that I'm complaining, of course, I'm just wondering why. Kokana appeared confused, as though Naruto had inquired about the blueness of the sky. Uzumaki-sama, do you not know that your family was the one who gave me the money to build this restaurant? No one ever seemed to know anything about the Uzumakis, so Hinata and Naruto were both shocked that this man was aware of them. You know about my family? The man grinned. Of course I do, Uzumaki-sama. I was in contact with your family for some time, and I am pleased to say that I consider myself one of their friends. I was told of a young Uzumaki with blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and I made a vow to always welcome him into my establishment as I have welcomed his family in the past. Naruto suppressed his curiosity about his family. Hinata was the focus of this evening, and he would always have time in the days ahead. Thank you Enju-san for your kindness. Once more, the man bowed. Of course now, what may I get you two to start off with? Your meals will of course be on the house? This was the cue for Naruto's stomach to start growling, which made Kokana laugh and Hinata laugh. Alongside Kage Bunshin, he was in the last place he should be, completing everything and making sure it was flawless. He was pleased with the way his work turned out and jumped back to stand on the hilltop overlooking it. She'll love it. He made several more clones. Alright, one of you guys dispelled to send back the memories, the rest of y'all stay here and make sure no one messes this up and make sure the rest of the guys stay hanged. This whole thing will fall apart if even one of them jumps the gun. As the clone leapt off to locate the original, they all hide, leaving a dozen clones to choose who would dispel it. Tension was rising as they all gathered around and started glancing at the other clones. They slipped into their taijutsu stances as their hands started to creep toward their kunai pouches. They all yelled simultaneously at the height of the tension. Jan Kenko. It was evident that they all threw out paper when they all threw out their hands. One of the clones sighed as they all started to perspire. Maybe doing a Janken, rock paper scissors, competition with clones of the same person wasn't a good idea? With Hinata and Naruto, the contented couple was chatting happily while enjoying a dessert of wasanban, which are multicolored sugar candies. The night had gone smoothly so far, and Naruto had the added benefit of meeting someone who knew his family well. He had already been asked to return to talk about what the man knew. While they were wrapping up, Kokana returned to the table. I hope that you two found your dinners to be enjoyable? Naruto took Hinata's hand and squeezed it lightly. I'm sorry Enju-san, but nothing will be able to beat Hinata's cooking, but I will admit, it was very delicious. Kokana grinned. Of course Uzumaki-sama, I understand completely. Is there anything else I can get for you two? If Hinata was done, Naruto glanced at her to let her know he was done. She shook her head and grinned. Thank you Enju-san, but I think we're finished now. Are you sure you won't let me at least compensate you in some way? Kokana bowed and shook his head. I wouldn't dream of it Uzumaki-sama. If I accepted your money I would shame your ancestors, and the guilt would eat me alive. This is the least I can do. With a shrug, the blonde thanked the man once more before getting up from his chair and offering Hinata his arm. She accepted his invitation and left the restaurant with him. She put her arm around his back and pulled him into a passionate kiss. Once they were out of sight, initially taken aback, Naruto simply followed the crowd and started giving the gesture back, taking pleasure in the girl he was with. Little squeaks and moans. Hinata rested her forehead against his as they parted, panting. That was a thank you for treating me so well tonight Naruto. With a smile, Naruto pulled Hinata flush against him, causing the girl to squeak. You're certainly welcome, Nada, but the night isn't over yet. Through Shunshin, on a hill just outside the city, they vanished in a whirl of leaves. Hinata was perplexed as to their purpose, but then she became aware of her surroundings. The pair was barely illuminated by the dim lanterns that surrounded them as they stood at the top of the hill. When Naruto signaled for her to turn around, the scene in front of her made her gasp for air. A vast meadow was dotted with lavender plants, which brilliantly displayed their inherent hues under the soft moonlight. She was so captivated by its unadulterated natural beauty that she failed to notice another swirl of leaves behind Naruto and the well-known poof of a Kage Bunshin dispelling. At last, she was able to speak. This is amazingly beautiful Naruto. I never knew lavenders grew this late into the year. Behind her, she heard Naruto's voice. They don't. The smoke from what appeared to be hundreds of Kage Bunshins dispelling filled the entire field. At that moment when the smoke cleared, the actual lavenders were still there, but they were arranged in a particular pattern. Naruto bought lavender and spelled out the words, "Will you marry me?" before Hinata arrived. Her eyes widened, and when she turned around again, she saw Naruto on one knee, grinning broadly and holding an engagement ring up to her with a larger purple tanzanite stone in the center. The band was crafted from white gold and featured 4 purple diamonds that spread out from the center like flower petals. The stones shone brilliantly even in the dark, and the light glinted off the ring in a spectacular way. Hinata's eyes started to well up with tears, and she raised a hand to her mouth. She started to shake a little and threw herself at the blonde, knocking him to his back just before Naruto asked her what was wrong. Tears were streaming down her cheeks onto his as she pressed her lips to his and entangled her fingers in his hair. She concealed her face in the bend of his neck when they eventually parted ways. Yes, yes, a million times yes. As he put his arms around Hinata and gradually raised himself to a sitting position, with Hinata in his lap, Naruto never stopped grinning. After taking off his arms, he raised her left hand and placed the band on her ring finger. Then he extracted a matching white gold ring from his pocket and put it on his left hand. After finishing this, he raised her face to meet his and placed his hands on her cheeks. Then, with passion and love, He swooped in for another kiss. As their kiss intensified, Hinata's own hands returned to their place in his hair. Naruto laughed from the vibrations as Hinata started moaning into his mouth once more. She pouted a little when he broke up with her, much to her chagrin. "Narukoi, why did you pull back so early?" He merely leaned in to whisper in her ear while chuckling. "Don't worry, Nada, I already told you, this night is far from over." He put his arms around her waist before she could ask him another question, and he vanished into their hotel bedroom in yet another whirl of leaves. Upon regaining her balance, Hinata discovered that two arms had encircled her waist, drawing her into a cozy embrace. Lips were planted on hers before she could say a word, and she allowed herself to melt into the kiss. She put her arms around the blonde's neck and fisted the hair in her hands as she ran her fingers through his spiky locks. She wormed her tongue into his mouth, where she struggled for control. After pulling just enough to cause him to open his mouth slightly with minimal opposition, she released her hold on his hair and moved it to his suit coat, gently pushing it away from his shoulders. It dropped to the ground, and Hinata raised her hands once more to hold his hair. Hinata, still struggling for control, stroked Naruto's head as he undid several top buttons on his coat and pulled off his tie. Naruto quickly removed his shirt and reached up to Hinata's shoulders to gently draw her back. She reluctantly pulled out of his mouth and let go of his hair. "Nada, I just want to make sure that this is what you want. I don't need to be intimate with you to know that you love me, and we have the rest of our lives to be physical. I just don't want this to change anything between us. If something happened and you left, I don't think I can survive having someone else leave me like Gigi did. I just don't think I'm strong enough for that." Hinata kissed him on the lips and put her arms around his neck. "Naruto, listen to me right now. Nothing, and I mean that, nothing, will ever change the way I feel about you. This isn't some fangirl crush like all those girls back in the academy. This is real love. I love your jokes. I love your determination. I love your personality, and I love your caring nature. So far I haven't found anything not to love, and the fact that you're very handsome doesn't hurt either. I want to be with you, now and forever, and be the woman you wake up to every single day, the woman you come home to, and the woman you share your dreams with." Naruto gave her another kiss. "I love you so much, Nada." She gripped his neck more tightly. "I love you too." Once more, they brought their mouths together sensuously, but this time, Naruto was the one to attack her mouth with his tongue and engage her in a struggle for dominance. She let out a startled squeal of joy, thrilled that Naruto was at last prepared to embrace her completely. After a few seconds, Naruto successfully unwrapped the complex knot by bringing his hands down to her obi. Hinata felt shivers down her spine as Naruto slowly traced the outline of her body with his fingers. When his hands finally reached the fabric on her shoulders, he gently pushed the robe off, allowing it to slide past her shoulders and collect into a pile of dead silk at her ankles, leaving her only wearing a lacy bra and soft lavender underwear. Naruto was pushed out of Hinata's mouth as she giggled into the kiss. "Not very nice, Narukoi. I shouldn't be the only one like this." With a smile on her face, she carefully reached down to the bottom of his trousers and undid the button and zipper, allowing Naruto to exit the dress pants and enter his burnt orange boxers. After admiring each other's bodies for a short while, they were back in each other's arms, slowly kissing and expressing their full range of emotions. Hinata wrapped her legs around Naruto's waist in the middle of the kiss, feeling his increasing arousal caress her butt. In order to support the additional weight, Naruto had to put his hands down to Hinata's butt, and he collapsed onto the bed with Hinata straddling him, much like he had on his first morning in her bed a few days earlier. After breaking the kiss, she smirked and brought her hands behind her back to her bra's clasp, where she took off the offending piece of fabric and released herself. Naruto was able to witness her first self-discovery. Despite his youth, Naruto had already gone through puberty and knew what excited him, and Hinata was the one he was most excited about at the moment. His eyes were wide with curiosity and anticipation when Hinata noticed Naruto staring. She laughed and tossed her bra off the bed to be forgotten until morning. "It's okay, Naruto, you can touch if you want to." Naruto appeared to be startled out of his reverie by the words, and he ran his hands up Hinata's sides, caressing her growing curves until she shivered with delight. After a while, his hands settled beneath the swelling of her breasts and cupped them. When Naruto started kneading the flesh beneath his hands, Hinata felt a shock of electricity run down her spine, and she was unable to control her groans any longer as Naruto continued his ministrations, her eyes half closed with pleasure. When Hinata started grinding on his increasing arousal, Naruto's own moans started, sending waves of pleasure through his body. The girl below him groaned as Naruto let go and held Hinata while he flipped them over. "Naru, please, I can't take it anymore," he merely grinned. "I want to do this right. I want to show you that this is out of love, not lust." Hinata was so overcome with emotion that her eyes began to water. She had never known someone to care so deeply for her. She never had a loving mother to comfort her when she woke up in the middle of the night shivering from a nightmare. A friend to talk to and share her dreams with, or someone to hold her when she sobbed after being called a failure. However, she had at last found someone who wanted to do all of those things for her and show her the kind of love she had never experienced as a child. Hinata put her arms around Naruto's neck and drew him in as he kissed her to stop her tears while running his right hand down Hinata's side once more and following his trail across her toned stomach down to her covered womanhood. Naruto used his left arm to maintain some distance from her. Hinata felt a hand touch her in a place she had never been touched before, causing her to jump a little and open her eyes. She would have gasped, but she had something in her mouth right now, and she couldn't push Naruto away to do so. Instead, she moaned in a throaty voice. He continued to touch the blonde, who simply smiled into the kiss. He had been gauging Hinata's reactions and experimenting with what he believed would make her feel good up until this point. Since then, he had concluded that Hinata was fairly sensitive, and his touch alone caused her to jump off the sheets as her underwear got progressively wetter, which filled him with pride. To his surprise, Hinata raised her legs and encircled his waist with them. Then she pushed off, bringing her arms down to the bed and rolling them both over so Hinata was on top again. She sat up, panting, and drew her head back. That wasn't very nice, you teased me a lot, and now I can't wait any longer. Crawling back a little, she reached down to the group of Naruto's boxers and pushed them down to his feet. Releasing him entirely, Hinata lowered her own underwear and repositioned herself above Naruto, panting once more, her eyes going slightly glassy. You don't know how long I've dreamt of this, of being with you, making love to you, holding you. Grinning, Naruto rubbed his hands along Hinata's sides. Now that dream is a reality. I love you, Nata. Hinata returned the smile. I love you too. She caught him and positioned him, lifting herself a little before descending and swallowing him whole. She squeaked and squeezed her eyes shut, allowing the pain to subside as each second was more enjoyable than painful. Naruto kept stroking her with his hands up and down her sides as Hinata steadied herself with her hands on his chest. For him, it was torture. It was the most blissful feeling he had ever experienced. Hinata's forced squeezes didn't help either, and the pleasure burning through his nerves made his whole body burn. She was all his, and simultaneously wet, tight, and warm. He was fighting the urge to move inside her. He wanted their first encounter to be as enjoyable for her as it was for him. After what felt like an eternity, she gradually started to move her hips against his, giving Naruto a rush of pleasure. She quickly picked up speed after he put his hands on her hips to help her move against him with increasing speed. Her hips rocked back and forth. The sensation of being so fully filled caused Hinata to begin groaning lightly when Naruto started thrusting his hips up. The pleasure she was experiencing only grew stronger. She was rendered incoherent by the blonde's gestures, and the grinding was quickly replaced. Yes, Okami, yes, faster, please. Her groans and pleas for more energized Naruto. He grasped her shoulders and twisted them around so she was on bottom once more because he had reached the limit of what he could do in his position. She put her legs around his waist and continued to hold his shoulder as he smiled down at her and kissed her. I have you pinned now, Nata. His eyes rolled into the back of his head as she giggled and pushed her hips up against his. After gathering his thoughts, he put his face against hers, kissed her, and then buried his head in the pillow beside her head. It was intoxicating to him to be able to smell Hinata's natural scent mixed with all the other pleasant scents and aromas he pulled away, then buried himself deep inside her once more. Hinata's mouth was fixed in a O shape as her head smashed back into the pillows and her back arched off the bed. She experienced new levels of pleasure and body jolts as the blonde repeatedly pulled himself out of her and then rammed himself back in. She knew she would be sore in the morning when Naruto grabbed her hips to move even more quickly because her head was bouncing up and down on the pillows. Hinata opened her eyes a little, but then she felt him strike a spot inside of her, causing liquid fire to shoot through her body. Something was growing inside of her, and she knew that the struggle for control would be lost in a matter of seconds beneath their panting. She whispered as a stray tear of joy escaped her eye. I love you. Something inside of her exploded, causing her eyes to pop open. She screamed for her release and clamped down on her partner as his eyes glazed over and he lost himself in the torrent of pleasure. Naruto was unable to handle the sensations and soon joined her in going over the edge. They remained in that position for a few more seconds before collapsing onto one another, both of them gasping for air. Their eyes started to close from exhaustion as the adrenaline started to leave their bodies. Hinata was on top of Naruto, resting on his chest after he rolled his arms around her as his future wife dozed off. Naruto grinned down at her and brushed one of her bangs behind her ear. He lowered his head and planted a kiss on the crown of her head. I love you, Nata, now and forever. The young couple's faces were directly illuminated by the sunlight that filtered through the blinds and filled the hotel room. Hinata's eyes opened slowly, and the first thing she saw was that she was still lying fully on Naruto's chest, nude, and her legs were still entwined with his limbs. She couldn't recall ever being happier with her life, and a smile appeared on her face as she exhaled joyfully at the realization that one of her dreams had come true. 2 arms encircled her, drawing her tightly in as she struggled to free herself from the heap of limbs and pushed off the bed. "Don't go, I'll lose all my warmth." With a smile, Hinata gave the boy beneath her a hug. "We can't just lounge about all day. Jiraiya-sensei told us to continue our training outside the city starting today. We should get up, and I need a shower too." With a sigh, Naruto slowly let Hinata push off his chest and left him in his embrace. His eyes widened as he watched her slowly reveal her upper half, and he could sense his own reaction was the same as it had been the previous evening. Hinata blushed and unconsciously covered herself when she saw his eyes, which made Naruto blush and close his eyes. Sorry, Nada. I didn't mean to stare. I'll close my eyes if you want me to so you can go to the bathroom and shower." He opened his eyes to see the girl above him unwrapping herself and placing a hand on his cheek after hearing giggling. "Naruto, there isn't any reason to be embarrassed, not anymore at least." To combat the embarrassment, Naruto rubbed his cheek against her hand while laughing and closing his eyes. "Yeah, I guess you're right. Thank you for that, by the way." Naruto appeared perplexed as he opened his eyes once more. "What do you mean?" Laying down on top of him once more, Hinata traced designs on his chest. "Well, I mean, last night was easily the most amazing night of my life. The dinner was fantastic and you such a gentleman the entire night. It made me feel special then when you proposed. Well, that was the most romantic thing I've ever heard of, and trust me, I know romance since Kurenai-sensei talks about all the stuff Asuma-sensei does for her, and her stories don't even come close to what you did. I was just so happy to finally be able to show you how much I loved you." Naruto merely laughed. "Nada. I already knew that you loved me. In fact, I don't think there has been a day this past week where you haven't told me, so all I want is for you to be happy. So if you're happy, I'm happy, but for the past few days I got this feeling that I needed to give you some kind of special night to remember." She raised her eyebrows at him and giggled. "Oh really?" After a moment of confusion, Naruto's cheeks flushed at her suggestion. "No, not like that. That happened because I finally had enough time to prepare myself for taking that kind of step up in our relationship, especially because we still didn't know each other very well." The girl with the blue hair simply let out a contented sigh. "Yeah, I'm glad you had us wait." Naruto rubbed her bare back while grinning. "Plus, I still felt like I owed you it." Hinata looked up into his eyes, her smile fading. "Naruto, you don't owe me anything. I want you to be with me because you want to, not because you feel like you owe me." Naruto shook his head uneasily. "Wait, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant that I felt bad because I never gave you any of those special romantic moments that couples have. I never got to make you feel special and loved, so I felt the least I could do was treat you to a romantic evening." A tiny laugh escaped Hinata's lips as she leveled her eyes on his face for a few long seconds before settling back on his chest. "You really are terrible with words, Naruto. You almost put yourself in the nin doghouse, and we aren't even married yet." She sensed a sigh of relief from the blonde beneath her. "And we have the rest of our lives to create those moments, Naruto, so don't feel bad about anything. Let's just enjoy the time we have together." For a few minutes, they simply lay there, enjoying the warmth of one another's bodies while attempting to ward off their drowsiness. Hinata finally rolled off him and stood up with a stretch after a particularly long yawn. "Okay. Now we really need to get up. If we don't finish this training schedule, Jiraiya-sensei said he would make us do triple the normal workload, and I really don't want to test his ability to discover if we did it or not." With a sigh, Naruto ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I guess you're right. Well, guess we should shower first then?" Hinata simply smirked as she looked at him. "How very forward of you, Mr. Uzumaki." With his head tilted to the side, Naruto attempted to decipher her meaning, and suddenly it became clear. "Geez, Nada. I don't know who's worse, Ero-senin or you. I meant that we should both take showers, not take one together, though I wouldn't exactly be against it." With a smile, Hinata made her way to the restroom. "Well, come on then. I won't wait all day to get this sweat and grime off. No funny business though. I need to be able to actually train today." Without even turning around, she saw Naruto scurry from the bed and head for the restroom. Out of the city 4 hours later, both Hinata and Naruto were gasping for air. They were expected to put what they had learned into practice during a rough spar between the two after a demanding physical training session today. In just a few short days, both young adults demonstrated a discernible improvement in their ability to finish the entire physical component without taking a break. They were eager to see how much each of them had improved during the spar. Naturally, this resulted in the two sparring continuously for an hour, while their sensei watched closely. However, The embarrassing story of how they found their errant sensei starts with a very upset Naruto and ends with a very drunk Jiraiya stumbling out of a casino while mumbling about someone known as the legendary sucker. They eventually got a few hours of his time and an abandoned field outside the city to use for their training after forcing a few eggs in his stomach and several cups of water down his throat. The lecherous grin Jiraiya gave the couple when he saw how Hinata carefully sat down or got back up was obviously ignored by both of them. Naruto had previously been instructed to be mindful of the amount of chakra he used in each jutsu, particularly his cage bunshin. Since Naruto had always simply used the jutsu and had not paid any attention to how much chakra he had used, unless he was attempting to create a large number of clones at once, he didn't really understand what those instructions meant. He was shocked to discover that he had been using far more chakra for each clone, roughly twice as much as was required, and naturally wanted to know why he had never realized this before. Jiraiya informed him that although this particular jutsu was very chakra intensive, it was actually fairly easy to perform control-wise because his reserves were simply too great for him to notice. In fact, Jiraiya thought that Naruto, who possessed one of the world's largest chakra reserves, might find it to be the ideal technique. Jiraiya had Naruto practice his chakra control exercises because he made it very clear that every single ounce of chakra should be preserved and used with great care during a battle. Jiraiya failed to inform him that many of the foot and wind release jutsu were learned through those chakra control exercises, especially the leaf cutting exercise. However, Jiraiya's true motivation for initiating Naruto's control training was his understanding that Naruto needed to improve his control before moving on to the next phase of his training, which involved learning the Yondaimi's renowned Rasengan technique. Instead of standing her ground and fighting it out blow for blow, Hinata had been instructed to concentrate on using her Juken style, which flowed around her opponent. On the day following the group's departure from Konoha, Jiraiya observed Hinata practicing the katas for the Juken and remarked that she appeared overly stiff and rigid. She then acknowledged that she had been fusing the Hyuga's traditional Juken style with a taijutsu technique known as Nagale Ruken, flowing fist. Ever since she lost the Chunin exams, she took the initiative to find a fighting style that suited her preferences, and the old Sannin appeared to be sincerely impressed. He gave her advice on how to incorporate her natural adaptability into her attacks, which is where she was at the moment. With a quick jab here and a palm strike there, she had been evading every single one of Naruto's clones and scattering them naturally. She lacked the stamina of her opponent, so as she started to lose energy, she started taking more and more blows. They weren't hitting each other with all of their might, of course, but they were exerting enough effort to make them both sore. After their lengthy argument, they both collapsed to their knees, gasping for air. Jiraiya mentally noted that Naruto needed to learn some sort of taijutsu technique to replace his distorted form, which mainly depended on Cage Bunshin's ability to divert attention. He recognized Naruto as a strong person with a lot of unrealized potential. All he needed was a mentor who would take the time to explain things to him in a way that he could comprehend. Jiraiya grunted and got to his feet, stretching his back. Hinata nodded and went to her knapsack to get a bottle of water. "All right, you two, that wasn't too bad, Hinata. Great job in anticipating his movements and flowing around them, though you need to work on your stamina a bit more in order to hold up in longer fights." Naruto, the blonde said, raising his gaze to his sensei. "That was good. Well, about as good as I had hoped for. I thought for sure you two would go longer, but you two seem tired for some reason. Did you two not get enough sleep last night or something?" While Naruto simply turned a deep scarlet, Hinata choked on her water and began coughing violently. Before he became serious once more, Jiraiya laughed a few times. "In all seriousness, I did expect more from you, Naruto." Naruto gave a snort. "Gee, thanks Ero Sennin." Jiraiya let out a sigh. "What I mean is that there is still so much more that you can do. You have more potential in you than I've ever seen before, and that means a lot coming from me." Naruto grinned. "Really? You think so?" Jiraiya smiled. "I know so. You're strong, really strong, but you rarely land any hits because you don't have a solid taijutsu style. You just focus on using Cage Bunshins to distract your opponents in order to get in close to hopefully get a few hits in. You also don't really have any other jutsu besides that one and the Kachiyose no Jutsu summoning technique. So you are really limited to hand-to-hand combat in terms of what you can do fighting-wise." Naruto sighed. "Well, that isn't really my fault. No one would teach me anything, and whenever I asked for help people would always tell me to get lost." Jiraiya briefly had a dejected expression. "Well, that's why I'm here, kid. Now tell me something. You managed some progress in the leaf-cutting exercise, right?" With a nod, Naruto grabbed a leaf from the floor and held it in his hand. After closing his eyes and focusing for a few seconds, he opened his hands and eyes to reveal a cut across the leaf about a quarter of the way. Jiraiya took the leaf from his grasp, examined it, and then grunted in agreement. Good enough now here, catch. Jiraiya quickly reached into his pocket, took out a small, spherical object, and tossed it to his blonde pupil with the swiftness of an elite shinobi. Naruto had a very perplexed expression on his face when he finally managed to catch the object that had been thrown at him. Arrow Sennin, why did you give me a water balloon? The same question was on Hinata's mind as she watched them. Jiraiya raised his right hand, palm up, and they both watched. Because, right now I am going to begin teaching you a new jutsu, one of the Yondaimi's own creations to be exact, the Rasengan. As he spoke, Hinata and Naruto saw a tiny blue chakra orb in his hand come to life. The most fascinating thing they had ever witnessed was a ball no larger than the water balloon Naruto was holding in his hands, containing ripples of pure energy swirling around like a maelstrom that simply screamed of raw power. If Jiraiya hadn't pushed the ball of energy into the tree behind him, tearing the bark into millions of tiny fragments and blowing the trunk apart, they would have added the adjective, beautiful. One of Naruto's biggest shit-eating smiles was on his face right now. Wicked, I get to learn that. Jiraiya nodded his head and grinned. Yes you do, though it won't be easy. It took the Yondaime several years to create this technique, and it took me several months when he taught me the necessary steps. I believe you can do it in a month flat, given that you put your all into it. Naruto squeezed the water balloon experimentally before turning back to face his sensei. I'll get it down in 2 weeks. Jiraiya merely grinned. Cocky are we? Alright then, how about a deal? If you manage to get it down in 2 weeks, I'll teach you a jutsu of my own creation? Naruto smiled. You had better get ready to teach me that jutsu, because you're going down, Arrow Sennin. Jiraiya laughed in amusement. Jiraiya held up another balloon and said, okay, Gaki, show me what you can do now. The first step of the training is to pop the balloon by channeling your chakra into it to pop the balloon like this. His face briefly displayed a focused expression before the balloon's edges appeared to spike out at every point and it burst open, sending water exploding in all directions. Now, if you can do that, then the first part of your training is complete, but it won't be easy now. While you do that, I want you to make around 50 or so clones and have them continue the leaf cutting exercise. I'm sticking to my earlier condition that I won't start teaching you futon, wind release, jutsu until that exercise is mastered. Understood? While the original focused on the water balloon in his hand, 50 copies of himself instantly grabbed a leaf and got to work after the blonde returned his smirk and made the familiar cross seal. Suppressing a smile, Jiraiya looked at his other pupil. Okay, you next now. I take it you won't be able to use your legs very much today, am I right? Red in the face, Hinata tried to close herself off, but the Sanin's smirk was still palpable. She glanced at Naruto and saw that he was just as red. He appeared to be about to say something, but the older man went on. Hey, sorry about that. Couldn't resist. Once you make a living on what most people consider embarrassing, you don't really have a filter anymore. But in all seriousness, I had hoped that you two would be more responsible with this issue. I'm all for the romance mumbo jumbo, but what if you two had gotten attacked when I wasn't around? With your limited mobility, it's entirely possible that you could have been seriously injured or captured. Your name alone paints a massive target on your back, and many less than savory people would give their left nut to get their hands on an unsealed pair of Byakugan eyes. Both teenagers gave the ground a reprimanded glance. Neither of them had even thought about those things, or any other drawbacks. They hadn't even thought about the repercussions of their actions because they had been so engrossed in the moment. Naruto's eyes gradually grew to the size of saucers as he became aware of a crucial detail he had been oblivious to. Did you guys at least use preventative measures? Naruto's breathing accelerated, and he looked at Hinata, who appeared to be as composed as possible. Hi, I used a birth control jutsu that Kurenai-sensei taught me. Jiraiya and Naruto both let out a sigh of relief. Indeed, Naruto cherished Hinata and desired to start a family with her, but not at this time, when they were only 13 or 14 years old. Yes, he was relieved that Hinata took on more responsibility than he did because he was aware that the physical strain pregnancy can have on a young child like Hinata could be lethal. Jiraiya gave a headshake. Well, at least one of you two thinks with some clarity. Despite his desire to argue, Naruto swallowed his pride and carried on with his exercises because he knew there was a point to be made. Hinata bowed. Gomen-sensei, I promise that we will be more responsible in the future. After staring at the two for a few more seconds, the older Sanin sighed and leaned back against the tree. Geez, I feel like your freaking parents, not your sensei. Alright, now that that is out of the way, I want you to continue your training as usual. From what I saw, your chakra reserves have begun to increase. Question though, did you notice that you were able to spar longer before getting tired and were able to move quicker? Hinata confirmed by nodding her head. Well, that is because of two things. The first is the physical training regimen which jump-started your muscular growth. I mean, it was like your sensei never put you through a training regimen before, or your team babied you. Hinata's head hung high. My sensei didn't train me as harshly as she could have. She wasn't trying to hold me back or anything. But, I think she was just concerned about me and didn't want me to get hurt. Jiraiya gave a headshake. Well, she did hold you back, and it's only now that you are beginning to realize your full potential. I'm not like other senseis. I won't hold back, and I sure as hell won't baby anyone. Hinata simply hung her head in disapproval. She was aware that everything was true, although Kurenai prioritized her well-being. This did not mean that her training was as rigorous as it should have been. Jiraiya sighed as he turned to face her. Alright, now that I'm done with all the yelling, I think it's time that you. Damn it. The sudden outburst made Hinata and Jiraiya jump a little, and they turned to Naruto quickly. Their faces bewildered. He scratched the back of his head and laughed when he realized he had their attention. Sorry, stupid balloon won't pop, keeps flattening out like a disc. Jiraiya laughed. Just a few hundred more tries and you might be ready to move on to the second stage, but don't just swirl the chakra, that won't get you anywhere. While Jiraiya faced the Hyuga girl once more, the young blonde simply sighed and returned to his training. Like I was saying, it's great that you are increasing your reserves, but it'll still take at least several years to create the kind of defensive jutsu I envisioned, so in the meantime I'm going to have you just keep up the chakra control training with the leaves, but each day you are going to be using different tenketsu points. With a nod, Hinata turned to face her fiancé, who was facing his own obstacle. Am I going to be learning anything else than chakra control? Jiraiya grinned. Oh heavens no, that would be way too easy. No. You are going to continue your physical training regimen and I'll help you develop that nifty little Jiyuken style you're experimenting with now. I won't really teach you ninjutsu or genjutsu because it doesn't really complement the way you fight. Not to mention your old man would be pretty pissed at me if I did. The young Hyuga could only nod and smirk in agreement with Jiraiya's earlier assertion that it was true. But with that being said, it means I have free reign when it comes to taijutsu. The Sannin lowered himself into a defensive crouch, keeping his hands near his body and his legs bent. Now, come at me and try and hit me, if you can. At Konoha on his way to the hospital, Sasuke Uchiha was strolling along the sidewalk with his teammate. Apart from the fact that his mental health was deteriorating due to the fact that he was still compelled to spend time with his pink-haired teammate, who seemed to know where he was at all times, he wasn't hurt or anything. Aside from the solo missions that would allow him to get rid of his compulsive fangirl, his only hope was that he might be promoted to Chunin, which would allow him to finally separate from his team and begin some actual training. How many times, really, did a man have to refuse? No, this was merely a standard examination to ensure the seal wasn't misbehaving. He had to go once a week to ensure he wasn't under any sort of influence, ever since the Chunin exams. The idea that someone could manipulate him made Sasuke sneer. What a bunch of bullshit, it's taken away from me every time I manage to get stronger, it enrages me. Sakura strode in right behind him as he inhaled deeply and unclenched his fists, pushing through the hospital's doors. So what do you think, Sasuke? Uchiha blinked and looked in the direction of his teammate. Think about what? Sakura gave an eye roll. About Naruto, I mean. We haven't seen him for a while, and he seemed really depressed after Hokage-sama's funeral. Do you think we should visit him or something? We do have a few days off till they can find the next Hokage. When the blonde idiot was mentioned, Sasuke's eyes narrowed. He thought he had long since buried some very unpleasant feelings, but the mere memory of him brought them back when that crazy redhead was rushing at him while he was stuck on that tree branch. He felt completely powerless, not being able to do anything but sit there and accept his fate. Was exactly like that night all those years ago. That is, until, as usual, he charged in headfirst and saved Sakura's life. In addition to his own, Sasuke knew he could defeat Naruto in a fight before the exams even began, but now he wasn't so sure Naruto had grown so strong in that month. That infuriated him. I don't know where he is, and I don't care. You can visit him if you want, but leave me out of it. Sasuke then walked down the corridors to his designated room at the rear of the hospital. While he was walking, everyone was rushing around, but he didn't care. Like him, they had a job to do, so there was no use in trying to talk to any of them. That is, until he passed a room where there was an extremely fascinating conversation. So, do you think Kakashi will be okay? Sasuke stopped walking and turned to face the room. That sounded like the sensei of that green freak. Sasuke approached the door and pressed his ear against it, not realizing that such a seemingly innocuous act could have such terrible repercussions. After hearing a few hushed voices, Sasuke heard something he had been waiting for years. So is it true? Did Itachi Uchiha really infiltrate the village and fight several Chunin just to go after the Uzumaki kid? Sasuke stopped. He's back. Then the door opened and Guy's voice could be heard. Yes, it's true. He had a partner with him, a very strong shinobi by the name of Hoshigaki Kisame who was able to go toe-to-toe with me, but yes, he is without a doubt after Uzumaki Naruto. Last I heard from Kakashi they are somewhere near a post station still looking for Tsunade. Glaring at the two individuals inside, Sasuke flung open the door. His suspicion was confirmed when Guy and a gaunt-looking doctor turned to stare at the young man with the raven hair. Kakashi was unconscious on the hospital bed. Where are they? With a sigh, Guy approached Sasuke. Look Sasuke, I know what you're thinking right now, but you have to. Beside him, Sasuke punched the wall. You don't understand. I have to know where they are, I have to kill him. Guy was aware that he needed to take action to stop the Uchiha or risk making a grave error that would endanger his life. Now Sasuke, let's not do anything hasty now. After giving him a fierce look, Sasuke sprinted out of the room, almost tripping over a girl with pink hair in the process. With Hinata and Naruto, the two genin had never experienced such effort in their many days of travel. Their chakra networks had been strained to their breaking point, and every muscle in their body was screaming in pain with every movement. Even though Jiraiya was undoubtedly an elderly man, he repeatedly demonstrated to them why he is one of the most feared men on the continent. Every day brought a new set of obstacles to overcome. Jiraiya's announcement that they would be stopping in a small town to rest was well received. The two teenagers immediately unpacked their belongings and lay down together, Hinata using her fiancé's chest as a human pillow. Jiraiya smiled warmly and wrapped a blanket around them both before leaving the room to learn more about their target. It was evident that they were catching up because she had been spotted in this area in the last few weeks or so. It is reasonable to assume that the two were not in the best of moods when they were awakened by a hammering on the door. Hinata was the first to awaken. Naruto, go get the door. Naruto muttered something about naps while he was asleep and then fell back asleep. Knock knock knock. Hinata turned away from Naruto and opened a bloodshot eye. Naruto-kun, go get the door. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, the blonde sat up slowly. After taking a deep breath he turned to face Hinata, who had nearly dozed off again. She's fortunate to be so incredibly adorable. Stretching and cracking his back, Naruto snagged his legs over the bedside and slowly stood up. Knock knock at the door. Naruto squinted and complained. I swear if this isn't important I'm going to be really pissed off. Knock knock knock. Yeah, I heard you the first damn time. Naruto strode toward the door, grabbed the handle, and flung it open. Now, what is so damn important that you... He looked into a pair of mature Sharingan eyes, and they weren't his teammates, and the rest of what he was about to say died in his throat. Uzumaki Naruto, you are to come with us immediately. Unable to even breathe in the presence of such a strong and skilled assassin, Naruto froze as he gazed into the spinning eyes of his potential kidnapper. Fortunately for him, someone else was present to help him stop it. Narukoi, who is it? It was only now that Naruto realized there was a second person present that he winced and glanced between the two men breathing heavily. The blonde jumped back and threw the door shut in their faces. Naruto-kun? Naruto turned to his fiancée and took her hand in his. We have to go, Nada, now. Hinata's expression was one of confusion and daze. What? Why do we have to? When the door to their room was kicked open and a very sour-looking Uchiha strode in, the question she was about to ask was answered for her. Now that was very rude. Naruto, come with us now before we are forced to take more drastic measures. In response, Naruto raised his hands in the well-known cross seal, bringing a few seconds of distraction to life and giving him just enough time to seize Hinata and leap out the window without turning around. Cage Bunchins was vanquished from the room with a single blow of Kisami's sword, and as the smoke cleared, he was seen to be grinning ferociously as he watched his victim attempt to flee. You know Itachi, I think this might not be as boring as I thought it would be. This kid just might be some fun after all. With a sigh, Itachi repositioned his hat. Just remember Kisame that we need him alive. The blue man's smile widened even more. Oh, don't worry about that, he'll be very much alive when I'm through with him. With Hinata and Naruto breathing heavily, the two headed for an area outside the small town where they could hide among the trees. Naruto created a group of clones to track down their errant sensei after they had leapt out the window, but he was aware that it would take time they didn't have with those two following them. No, he required a speedier approach. He started channeling as much chakra as he could, but it wasn't the right kind, and brought his fingers into a familiar seal. He summoned as much of the Kyuubi's malevolent chakra as he could, focusing as hard as he could and allowing it to flow out into the natural world. It had all been blind luck, and he knew he lacked the training necessary to bring forth enough to use in battle like he did with Neji. However, what he had was sufficient to alert his teacher to the fact that Naruto was using the forbidden chakra, and it would at least raise some suspicions. After entering a tiny clearing, Naruto and Hinata collapsed to the ground to catch their breath. Hinata was kneeling on her hands and knees, taking deep breaths. "Do you think we lost them?" Naruto gave a headshake. "No, but I think we have a few moments to rest at least." "Oh, how wrong you two are." An eerie voice seemed to drift across the clearing, seemingly moving with the breeze, and the genin leapt to their feet. "Why are you making this harder for yourselves? You know you can't run from us." Naruto grasped Hinata's hand and drew her in. "Why don't you show yourselves? Afraid of a few genin like us?" There was a deeper, more sinister laugh in the air. "It's a shame we have to do this. You are my kind of shinobi, cheeky and headstrong." Two figures wearing black cloaks, reed clouds, and straw hats emerged from the tree line and came toward the couple. The intense desire to kill that radiated from them brought back too many memories of Naruto's fight with Shukaku, which he was willing to forget for the rest of his life. The strain caused Hinata to wilt and start shaking. "Naruto-kun, I'm scared." Naruto tightened his hold on her hand and drew her closer. Me too." A few yards away, the two figures came to a halt and took off their hats with thinner cheeks and a more calculating demeanor. The first appeared to be an older Sasuke. The fact that the man in front of them was the one who slaughtered the entire Uchiha clan in a matter of hours without assistance was obvious to anyone who wasn't a genius. The individual beside him appeared much more bizarre and lethal, although neither of those characteristics diminished the sense of death he was projecting. His blue skin and hair emphasized his toothy grin and feral smirk, giving him a definite shark-like appearance. Naruto carefully glanced between the two men. Who are you and what do you want with me?" The Uchiha took a step. "My name is Uchiha Itachi, and this is my partner Hoshigaki Kisame. We were tasked by our organization Akatsuki with collecting the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Now, be a good boy and come with us peacefully, while we are still willing to let the Hyuga live." As Naruto felt Hinata tense in his arms, he realized what he needed to do to protect her. She had saved him from the brink, and he had promised himself that he would always put her before himself. Now was the moment to keep his word. After giving the quivering girl in his arms one final glance, he looked back up at the two men. "If I go with you too, do you promise to let her go?" Below him, Naruto heard a gasp, and it devastated him to hear Hinata start pleading with him to change his mind about what he was going to do. He watched as Kisami's smile turned to a frown, but that didn't worry him. Only the nod Itachi gave him was grabbing his attention. Naruto turned them around so his back was to the two Akatsuki members and sighed as he held Hinata close to him. He kissed her on the cheek and whispered as quietly as he could in her ear despite her gasps and sobs. "Just follow my lead." The only acknowledgement he got was the girl stiffening in his arms. In order for the two behind him to hear him, Naruto loudened his voice. "Hinata, when you saved me that night I promised myself that I would always put your life ahead of mine, and now is the time to honor that promise. Just know that these past few weeks have been the happiest of my life, and I only wish I had more time to show you just how glad I am that you were able to love an idiot like me." Releasing Hinata, Naruto turned around and walked slowly in the direction of his imminent death. With a sigh, Kisame closed his eyes. "Well shit, and here I thought that he would be just a little fun. Why can't any of them ever fight back?" Itachi turned to face his partner and rolled his eyes. "Why must you always complain about the smallest things? Why can't you just be happy that?" The swirling orb of energy aimed at the middle of Itachi's chest was avoided only by his shinobi instincts, but Kisame was unlucky and faced the attack head-on, which sent him hurtling back toward the trees. He quickly dispatched the clone assigned to attack Itachi by chopping off the base of his skull, cutting the spinal cord and causing it to explode in a puff of smoke. Itachi glanced at his companion as he picked himself up and brushed away some of the dirt. Though he was aware that most of it was pure luck and a breach in their defenses that let him even approach to use the unfinished Rasengan, Naruto smiled, proud that he had managed to get the drop on such formidable foes. In order to avoid any counter, Naruto leapt back. How was that for fighting back? Kisame simply cracked his neck and laughed. "Well, you managed to tear my cloak a bit. I'll give you that. You're still years away from being able to fight us, brat." Naruto grinned. "Oh, we know, but you guys leave yourselves open quite a bit." Kisame noticed that the ground beneath him was rigged with more than a dozen premium explosive notes that were already going off when he looked down. He grinned. "Now that's more like it." The sudden shockwave behind him momentarily stunned Itachi, and he caught a glimpse of the Hyuga rearing her right arm back to strike him in the back. Probably with her heart in her sights, he whirled around and grabbed her by the throat with unhuman speed. "Pathetic. You're lucky that Kisame is playing around, or you would both be dead by now. But I've grown tired of the games, so any last words for the Jinchuriki before you die?" The girl smirked, which surprised him. "Yeah, just a few. Now Hinata." With a curse, Itachi looked back to see the Hyuga approaching once more. He felt two weights on his arms as he was ready to block her path, and when he looked down, he saw two cage buncheons using all of his strength to pin his arms down. The blonde looked up at the Uchiha with a smile, never trust a fox. Then Itachi felt a rush of chakra tear through his back, tearing his heart to atoms. The Hyuga was engulfed in a red mist as his eyes widened and blood spurted from his mouth. Hinata was incredulous. Together, she and Naruto had vanquished one of the most dreaded missing nin in Konoha history. Naruto-kun. We did it, She saw the cage buncheons fade away, not exploding into smoke, but simply vanishing from the world. Hinata appeared confused. Naruto, what's going? She watched in horror as Itachi's body started to shrink, his black hair turning blonde, his cold red eyes turning blue, and his pitch-black cloak changing into the Hyuga robes Naruto had also taken with him on their journey. As reality ripped through Hinata, her breath caught in her throat and tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. Her fiancé, the boy she could easily claim to have fallen in love with, coughed up more blood from her attack as she watched in a trembling form. Looking past Naruto, Hinata noticed a distressed-looking Kisame and a concerned-looking Itachi. You see, Itachi, this is why I hate it when you use genjutsu, because shit like this happens. Unable to comprehend what had happened in the previous 5 seconds, Hinata collapsed to her knees in desperation. However, this did not mean that reality was not going to show up. She saw fear, pain, and confusion when she looked up into the boy's face who had vowed to be by her side until the end of her days. As her name slipped from his lips, he fell forward, and she was unable to even get her body to catch him. Pain. For as long as he could remember, Naruto's life had been summed up in this one word: the suffering caused by hunger, loneliness, and sadness. On some days he would just stay home under the covers and cry until his sobs tore through his developing body, and on other days he wished he had never been born. On these days, he would typically wear his signature smile to conceal the excruciating pain from everyone. He was always aware that others would take advantage of his pain if he expressed it, making him even more of a target. No, he could never show that side of himself to anyone. Then everything changed. One night he was spared the agony by someone. She gave his life a new purpose and provided him with the one thing he dreamed about before bed, the one thing he constantly yearned for from others, and the one thing he battled for every single day. Love. She had been following him, admiring him from a distance, and secretly falling in love with him, but he was unaware of it. He really didn't care, though he was happy for the first time in a long time, and he made it his life's work to ensure her happiness no matter what. It's true that this was the pinnacle of Naruto's life and the reason he was so happy. But then everything fell apart because there is always a corresponding and opposite low to every high that life offers, and Itachi Uchiha was the source of that low. He was one of the most feared men in the world for a reason, but Naruto never saw him move or even lift a finger when Hinata entered his life. Naruto had nearly forgotten that he was never given a fair deal in life, as though a god was watching him and trying to make his life as miserable as possible. All of that didn't even matter anymore. Knowing that this was what Neji had attempted to do to Hinata during the Chunin exams, he realized that there was not much that could be done for him. After he took that blow from Hinata, slowly, his vision began to deteriorate, and he felt dizzy and dropped to his knees. He expressed gratitude to his lucky stars for allowing him to see Hinata's face one final time before he passed away. Rewind. A smirking Kisame and a submissive Itachi were left behind as Naruto and Hinata fled from their hotel window. The shark man laughed and clenched his fist. I'm glad they ran. It's always so much more fun when they run. Itachi's eyes narrowed a little at their vanishing shapes. Kisame, we have been instructed to deal minimal damage to the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and anyone around him. We are merely here to test his skills and report back to Leader Sama. He won't tolerate any unnecessary roughness of any of the Jinchuriki. Kisame let out a sigh. Leave it to a Uchiha to kill all the fucking fun. I guess this means you're just gonna use your damn genjutsu then and see how he fares. His only response was a nod. That girl looked like a Hyuga, though aren't they supposed to be able to see through genjutsu or some shit like that? Itachi's eyebrows went up. Although they may be able to see through some of my abilities, I would be ashamed of myself if I wasn't able to capture a single little girl in my illusions, though I admit it would be incredibly difficult to face an opponent such as a Hyuga if they were more experienced. I believe I should have no issues with this particular one. Kisame grinned. I guess that's the Uchiha way of gloating then, huh? Whatever, if it fails then that just means more fun for me. After that, the two left the room, leaving only the splintered door as evidence of their presence. The two had never lost sight of their targets, and it was almost funny to see them pause to catch their breath in a little clearing. Believing they were safe, they noticed that the Hyuga appeared considerably more exhausted than the Jinchuriki, which is evident given the enormous chakra reserves that come with having a chakra life force inside of one's body, which all Jinchuriki possess. The girl's fate was sealed when she was the first to look in Itachi's direction. While hunched over with her hands on her knees, the girl wouldn't even remember the pair of spinning crimson eyes that first captivated her, because the Akatsuki member was so proficient and completely knowledgeable in genjutsu. Alongside Jiraiya on his way back to the hotel he had reserved for his two disciples, Jiraiya experienced a unique power surge, one that was connected to the energy released by the Kyuubi's chakra. Shit, that kid better have a damn good reason for using that chakra here. It's like he's broadcasting his position to Akatsuki. The Sannin carried this thought with him until he arrived at his destination, their hotel room, and he now had more questions than answers, such as why the window was broken, why the door was in pieces, and why the bed appeared to have been torn from it quickly. Then it dawned on them, oh, shit, someone else stormed into the room before he could even move. Itachi. Where are you? With a bewildered expression on his face, Jiraiya turned to confront a gaunt-looking Sasuke. Itachi? As in Uchiha Itachi? What are you talking about? After giving the Sannin a quick glance, Sasuke looked around the room. You're that old pervert who trained the Dobi for the Chunin exams. Jiraiya gave an eye roll. Even though I don't know him, I can tell he's a piece of work. To answer your question, yes, I am the one who trained Naruto for the Chunin exam finals. I am Jiraiya, better known as the Gamma Sannin. Sasuke's expression changed to one of realization as he finally understood who he was speaking to. That Dobi was able to secure a month of training from a Sannin. He cleared his mind with a quick shake of his head. He had more important things to do. I don't care who you are. Where is Itachi? He was in Konoha a few days ago and he told someone he's coming after the Dobi. Now where is he? For a few moments, the elderly Sannin narrowed his eyes in contemplation. Uchiha Itachi must have been trying to use the confusion of the invasion to sneak into Konoha if he was there. But why? If he claimed to be pursuing this Dobi, the only thing he could be pursuing would be. Disregarding the Uchiha's pursuit, Jiraiya spun around and leapt through the window after his pupil, trying to detect any chakra that might signal the location of his blonde apprentice. Alongside Naruto with his back to Hinata, Naruto started drawing a few kunai and shuriken from his pockets and other holsters, preparing to defend himself and his fiancée at any time. Have you caught your breath yet? I believe we may have a few more seconds before we must depart. He never received silence in response, which is unusual for Hinata, particularly when Naruto spoke to her. Nada? Do you hear me? Nothing had changed, so he made the decision to find out what might be causing her to nod off in such a circumstance. Hey, Nada. Have you heard me? He trailed off when he saw the distant expression in her eyes, which he had seen several times before, as though she was staring at something that wasn't there. When he also saw that she was motionless like a statue, he could only conclude that she was practicing genjutsu. Jumping to her side, Naruto defensively raised two kunai. You son of a bitch, you dare not harm her, get out there and show off. After a moment of silence, he heard a dark laugh coming from the tree line. Itachi, I must say that this child is wearing a huge pair of shoes. Is he calling us out? We don't often come across someone with that level of bravery. I'm on the verge of not wanting to harm him. Since he was only a genin, Naruto knew that his chances of escaping this unscathed were slim to non-existent, so he tightened his hold on his kunai, swallowed the lump in his throat, and ignored the drop of perspiration trickling down the side of his face. What did you do to Hinata? Exactly. More laughter greeted him as two figures emerged from the shadow of the tree line, and the shadows were replaced by the shapes of Itachi and Kisame, one with a big toothy grin and the other with a bored expression. Naruto took a deep breath, stepping between Hinata's frozen form and the two missing nin, and looking directly into his opponent's eyes with all the bravery he could muster. Release her. This is not related to her. Itachi watched with indifference as Kisame's smile widened, but Naruto's next move, reversing his kunai's grip and holding it over his heart, halted them both in their tracks. Allow her to leave, or I'll make sure the two of you never receive the Kyuubi. Well shit Itachi, it looks like this little punk knows how to play dirty, Itachi's eyebrows rose as Kisame's smirk turned into a frown. So it would seem, but he forgot one very important fact. Itachi shrugged, closing his eyes. Naruto felt the cold dread in his gut, heard the blood rushing in his ears, and felt his heart pounding in his chest as a strange silence descended upon the group. He looked between the two for any sign of movement, but he was not even remotely prepared for what was about to happen. Itachi's Mangekyo Sharingan, with its blood-red background and black tri-pronged bladed eye, was the last thing Naruto saw. Alongside Naruto. Where am I? Naruto sat up, rubbed his head, and looked around at the strange place he was in. A world of pure black with a blood-red full moon hanging menacingly in the sky. He could see that he was in Konoha from the buildings, but everywhere he looked was a pure black silhouette. What? Why have I returned to the village? Welcome Naruto. There was a cold fear that was clawing its way into Naruto's stomach and taking hold of his being, causing him to shiver in horror when the voice spoke out of the darkness again. Naruto jumped a little and looked around for the voice, but there was no one there. No wind, no light other than the moon, and no other soul in the village. This is my world, the world of Tsukuyomi, unlocked by the achieving the final stage of the Sharingan, the Mangekyo Sharingan. And in this world, I am Kami. Naruto started running in vain, attempting to escape the fate he knew deep down he could not avoid, being hunted like an animal for the entertainment of others, always discovering that no matter how hard he tried or how strong he got, he was still weak. Eventually, he was standing in front of the Hokage's building, hunched over, hands on his knees, and struggling to breathe. The air seemed thicker and more difficult to breathe here. The voice then came back with the unbridled undertones of obvious laughter. Little Naruto-kun, where do you go? Where can you hide from me, in your opinion? The blonde looked up at the sky and yelled, tears of sheer horror streaming from his eyes. What are you requesting from me? Don't you have enough sniff from me already? Before the voice chose to respond in a mocking tone, there was an unsettling quiet that pervaded the shadow world. As long as you live, it is never enough. Immediately behind Naruto, a wooden cross erupted from the earth before he could react. Heavy chains encircled his arms and legs, tying him to the cross and immobilizing him as he flailed in a fruitless attempt to break free. His tormentor suddenly appeared in front of him, holding a katana and maintaining the same emotionless stance. Now observe, Naruto-kun, watch as I reveal the horrors of this world to you and tear down the walls of your mind just like I did to my stupid brother all those years ago. Watch as I rip everything you value from you. Hinata emerged from the shadows, kneeling in front of the cross he was bound to, and Naruto watched in horror as she spoke in her quiet voice and slowly, very slowly, looked up at the lavender pools that Naruto had fallen in love with. Naru-kun, I love you, I've always loved you. A blood-curdling scream erupted from Naruto's lungs, and tiny droplets of blood covered his face as he watched as the katana was thrust through her back, destroying her heart and essentially ending her life, before he could respond. Naruto made himself look at the Uchiha with as much hatred as he could muster in his heart after a few minutes of agonized cries of pain and sorrow. Why are you doing this, exactly? Sadness flickered before the Uchiha's eyes for a fleeting moment. To test your conviction, then the next casualty was introduced. With Sasuke and Jiraiya, Kami, please let me make it on time. As it were, it would take a little more than 2 minutes to reach the point where he felt the Kyuubi's chakra burst, a mutually agreed upon distress signal in case Naruto ever encountered someone he couldn't handle. Jiraiya was pumping as much chakra into his legs as he could without rupturing muscles or damaging his chakra coils. You old bastard, hold on. It took years of training to be able to go full tilt like this for anything longer than a couple minutes before chakra depletion, unless you were Naruto Uzumaki, of course. So Jiraiya was a little taken aback that the Uchiha could keep up with him at this speed, but the Sannin could already see the strain on the Genin's face. Back off, kid, if you can't keep up when we get to Naruto, I'm not sure who or what we'll find, but I can assure you that it will be much more difficult to pump out any baby Uchihas if you get in my way and cause harm to Naruto. Why do you care about that Dobi so much? Sasuke gulped in fear for the first time in a long time, but his bluster occasionally overcame his sense of self-preservation with his foolish attitude. It's not as if he wasn't going to be picked off eventually. If the situation had been different, and Jiraiya had not had to hurry to his destination, he would have made the first Uchiha eunuch himself. He had to make do with a mild threat, though. Uchiha, watch what you say about Naruto around me even though you're loved in Konoha. We're not even close to that village, and if you disparage my godson again, they won't ever find your body. Jiraiya's threat sent a chill down Sasuke's spine as the Uchiha chastised himself in his head for such a foolish remark. He's been training Naruto for almost 3 months, so it makes sense that he would like the idiot. Wait, did he just say godson? The Uchiha could barely make out movement ahead of him as the Toad Sage leapt away from him through the trees before he could ask his question. In the world of Tsukuyomi, Naruto had long since cried himself dry. He simply no longer had the heart to cry. He watched as the man he had come to despise with all his heart killed one by one the people he had ever known or cared about. Naruto felt as though he had been in this world for an eternity, and all that was left was a half-broken Uzumaki and a soulless Uchiha. Early on, the fabric of dreams and reality had collapsed, leaving Naruto unsure of what was real and what was illusion. After cleaning his katana from his most recent kill, Itachi turned to face Naruto. I can see the hatred and rage that are brewing inside of you. I see that you would annihilate me in any way you deem most heinous if you had the chance, am I right? Using whatever strength he possessed, Naruto simply snarled and glared. You can't let yourself fall into darkness, Naruto-kun, or there will be no hope for any of us, Itachi said with a sigh. What are you talking about? Gritted Naruto's teeth and clenched out an angry response. We live in an evil world, Naruto-kun, Itachi said, shaking his head and sheathing his katana in this illusion. I have depicted a very real possibility that you might encounter in the future. Particularly as a shinobi, you will occasionally be tempted to exact revenge after witnessing your friends being killed in front of you. In order to answer, Naruto suppressed his rage and shook off the tears that were pouring down his cheeks. So what was all this then? A sick joke? Itachi shook his head, saying, hatred and rage have dominated this world for far too long. Shinobi are essentially weapons that people in positions of authority can use however they see fit, kill as they see fit, and die as they see fit. Thousands of people are killed for the selfish ambition of one individual. Nations are born and destroyed, and wars are waged over tiny pieces of land. Itachi narrowed his eyes and said, even one's own family can't be trusted to respect the peace our ancestors bled and died for. He was staring at the ground. After a while, the Uchiha turned to face Naruto and said, but you can alter everything as you did with Zabuza and Gaara. You have been endowed with the ability to subdue even the most vicious of murderers. Although you may not be aware of it, the world has been waiting for someone like you since the beginning of time. Someone who can bring all peoples together under the banner of peace and understanding. Since he was so focused on the future and never really paid attention to his past achievements, Naruto honestly didn't know what to think and, for a moment, he believed what his attacker was saying. However, he now noticed a clear pattern. Wherever he was involved, he always sided with those who promoted peace and harmony and eventually came out on top. However, a thought persisted in his already disturbed thoughts. But why? Why did you torture me, attack Hinata-chan, and attack me? One of the few times in Itachi's life, he smiled. Not the phony smile he used to wear around his younger friends and family, but a real, sincere smile. This was to test you, as I previously stated. Despite being persecuted, being beaten and maimed, and witnessing the murder of everyone you cared about by a psychopathic killer, you listened to me and took my advice to heart. There aren't many people in this world who can put aside their anger and hatred like you did. Naruto took a few ragged breaths before he saw a hand appear in his vision, and he followed the hand up to a smiling Itachi before he could say another word. The cross he was strung up on vanished into the air, and he fell to the ground, landing on his hands and knees. Well, I think that Hinata-chan would be able to do that too. She has always been such a kind person, placing others above herself. Itachi simply nodded. She is. In fact, she will be able to bring you back, so make sure to keep her by your side if you ever give in to despair and darkness. A tiny smile appeared on the blonde's lips as he attempted to take the outstretched hand, but he never did. Naruto's eyes widened and a tiny gurgling sound came from his throat as his hand clasped the Uchiha's. A few seconds later, Itachi's own eyes narrowed in realization of what had happened, and he watched in stunned silence as the blonde's eyes rolled up into his head and he faded from the illusion world. Oh no, Tsukuyomi. Itachi watched in horror as the background vanished and the real world appeared, and Naruto sprayed blood all over the girl he was with, as if she had struck the Jinchuriki's heart muscles with a fatal blow that would shred them beyond repair, meaning that Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune and the heir to the Hyuga heiress, was going to die. The Sannin Jiraiya's arrival only made matters worse, and who was that behind him? Itachi inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. Hello Ototo. If it weren't for the Sannin holding the young Uchiha back, Sasuke would have been halfway through making a Chidori when he lunged at his brother in a clumsy attempt at retaliation, but Jiraiya instead gave him a quick chop to the back of his neck, knocking him unconscious for a few minutes at least, giving him time to deal with the situation. Finally, Jiraiya had time to gather the facts as the youngest Uchiha collapsed to the ground. Then there are those Akatsuki, Uchiha Itachi and someone from Kiri, judging by his headband based on the way the Hyuga is hunched over Naruto and crying. I can assume that he has been seriously wounded, possibly by Hinata herself. Before addressing them, Jiraiya leapt forward into the clearing and separated his two students from the S-class missing nin. Therefore, I doubt that you two will simply depart amicably, will you? With a savage smile, Kisame raised his weapon. No way. I've always pondered how I would stack up against a Sannin, and now is the ideal opportunity to. When his own partner Itachi thrust a hand in front of him, he abruptly stopped speaking. We must depart and report to Leader Sama. Kisame, I already have all the information I require, so fighting right now would be futile and could endanger the Jinchuriki even more. Skiing and shouldering his weapon, Kisame complained of a wasted chance. One final thread remained as Itachi and his partner vanished in corresponding swirls of leaves, both of them staring down at the Sannin. We will meet again, young Naruto, soon. Jiraiya exhaled a sigh of relief as the two shinobis' presence subsided, but his relief was fleeting because he was suddenly confronted with a situation that he had only ever encountered in his worst nightmares. His beloved student's last flesh and blood was dying not 5 feet away from him, and there was nothing he could do about it. He and Naruto knew this, but Hinata did not. Jiraiya-sensei, help him, please. You must. After I attacked the Uchiha while we were fighting them, he vanished, and then. He knew what he had to do after a few calculated seconds, and he wordlessly created 2 cage buncheons, one to pick up Sasuke's unconscious form while he attempted to pry Naruto's form out from under his fiancée, who was now hanging on by sheer wool. Her words were increasingly drowned out by the pure hysterics of the situation, and it didn't help that the other Uchiha was still unconscious. Hinata struggled for a few seconds before giving in and letting her master take Naruto from her while she wrapped her arms around her stomach. She felt filthy and like a murderer, but much worse, because she had just an hour before killed the boy she had claimed to love. Will he make it, Jiraiya-sensei? The clone of Jiraiya lifted the Hyuga up onto his shoulder and nodded to the real one, but before she could find Jiraiya anywhere, she felt a sharp pain in the back of her neck before everything went numb and she slumped over. All 3 of them hurried off as quickly as they could to the one person who could save his broken family after coming to a silent agreement. I have to find Tsunade, now.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.